on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, it's 12 o'clock and you're with GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. And coming up, Mick Lynch and the RMT meeting the Transport Secretary as we speak. It's a last-ditch attempt to avoid rail strikes across the Christmas period and the New Year. Well, the government says it will not negotiate for the rail companies, but could this all provide a breakthrough in the dispute that so far cost the country nearly £700 million? The UK seeing its highest net migration since the end of the Second World War, an estimated 504,000 more people coming into the UK than left last year. That's equivalent to the population of Liverpool. The figures being released just a day after the Home Secretary acknowledged the UK had lost control of its borders. Angry scenes outside the Scottish Parliament last night after yesterday's Supreme Court ruling that Holyrood cannot hold its own independence referendum. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon facing MSPs at what's likely to be a feisty question session, the first since yesterday's ruling. Let's actually dip in there. That started and listen to what's being said
the
at
First
Holyrood.
Minister denies it. But can I ask her specifically, is she denying this conversation took place? Is she denying NHS chiefs discussed a two-tiered system in Scotland's NHS, which apparently she finds funny? And is she saying the meetings... Is she saying...
Mr Ross, let's just be clear from the outset that we are going to conduct ourselves in a courteous and respectful manner. We will hear one another when we are speaking, one at a time. Mr Ross.
So the question to the First Minister on this important issue is she denying these conversations took place? Is she denying that NHS chiefs discussed a two-tier system in Scotland's NHS? Or is she saying the minutes of this meeting are wrong?
First Minister.
Well, firstly, Presiding Officer, can I just say it is, what is the best word to describe it, bold for a Conservative to come here and talk about privatisation of the National Health Service.
Thank you.
The Conservatives, who have done more than any other party in these islands, and at times they've had stiff competition from Labour, but have done more than any other party in these islands to privatise the National Health Service. I'm intrigued, though, at Douglas Ross's line of questioning. I did an interview on Monday addressing the comments in the Minute. The Minute is there. I wasn't denying then that the conversation had took place, and I'm not denying now. It was a meeting of some leading NHS directors. As a point of fact, it wasn't NHS board chief executives, but they were conversations, not, to use another word that Douglas Ross used, plans. Because let me let Douglas Ross into what shouldn't be a secret, but he clearly doesn't understand it. NHS leaders, however much respect I have for them, and I have considerable respect for them, do not make government policy. The government makes government policy, and the founding principles of the National Health Service that this government has done more than any to protect and to enhance are not, and as long as I am First Minister, never will be, up for discussion.
Douglas Ross.
Well, I have to say, I think it's very bold for Nicola Sturgeon to stand up and compare Scotland and other parts of the United Kingdom on privatisation, when we know that in Scotland, private treatment is up 84% since the start of the pandemic. compared to the rest of the United Kingdom, that is half of that. 84% here in Scotland, less than half of that across the rest of the United Kingdom. But as the Health Secretary passes her some notes, which she passes back again, so that's clearly no use, Hamza, let's look at what the actual document said. It said health boards had the green light. It said that health boards had the green light from the leadership to come up with and present their ideas for the reforms. The reports of the document said, and I quote, "Areas which were previously not viable options are now possibilities." So will the First Minister reveal what areas that she wouldn't consider before are now on the table? And given that she has said that the ultimate decision would be with government ministers, who gave NHS chiefs the green light to consider these plans going forward?
So this is the First Minister's questions in the Scottish Parliament and the discussion over that story that we brought you here at GB News of a possibility of a two-tier health system in Scotland. NHS, they're indicating that they may have to ask wealthier patients to pay for the service, and clearly that's caused some concern with Douglas Ross, the Tory leader in Scotland, challenging Nicola Sturgeon on that issue. But of course the background to all this, that huge decision on independence yesterday, and we'll be getting more with Olivia Utley, who was in Edinburgh yesterday outside the Parliament building, on that a little later. But let's now tell you that the government is in talks as we speak with Mick Lynch of the RMT union to discuss the next rail strikes due in the run-up to Christmas and the New Year. Well, the unions announced a series of 48-hour stoppages on the 13th, 14th, 16th and 17th of December. More to follow the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th of January. Let's speak now to Catherine Foster, who's outside the Department for Transport in central London. Catherine, we were sort of being told that the Transport Secretary would not negotiate with the union. So what is the basis of these talks today?
Well, basically, they want to try to unblock this logjam, because if a deal is not struck, then clearly there's going to be huge disruption to rail passengers again this Christmas. And so Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, yes, has clearly said he will not be negotiating directly with the unions. It is not the government's job, he says, because, of course, they are not ultimately the employers. It is up to the employers, Network Rail and the train companies to negotiate a deal. Now, Mick Lynch, Secretary General of the RMT, is in Department of Transport talking to Mark Harper now. He claims that the employers were ready to offer the unions a deal on Monday, that it was pulled with an hour's notice, the meeting that he was due to have, and that they were laying the finger of blame at the government's door because they're saying their mandate comes from the government. Now, Mark Harper is saying he's not going to get into flinging blame around, but that there is absolutely no possibility of an inflation level pay rise for rail workers, also stressing that the government is still propping up the rail industry to the tune of about £16 billion because rail use is down about 20% since the pandemic, and rail services are only down about 10%. So it is positive that they are at least talking. Grant Shapps, the previous Transport Secretary in the summer, wasn't even willing to meet with Mick Lynch, so I think we can see that as a positive, but I think there's still quite a way to go.
Although, of course, we reflect that the RMT's previous action was pulled when there were indications perhaps that there were advances in the talks. But, I mean, I think it's cost the economy £691 million so far, it's being estimated. I guess for the government, the problem is if it gives a green light for quite high pay increases, it unlocks the situation for everyone else then, given what's happening with inflation.
Yes, exactly. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has made it abundantly clear that their number one priority is to get inflation down. If lots of people start being given pay awards of in excess of 10%, the government is very concerned that will cause a wage price spiral that will just push prices up further, that pushes inflation up, demands for wages, and so it goes on. Yes, as you say, it's cost the economy to date about £691 million and about £320 million loss to the rail sector directly, and of course all the rail workers are losing their wages while these strikes continue, and people are increasingly looking at the railways, then losing faith in their ability to get across the country from A to B and finding different ways to travel. That is not what the railway needs. The railway needs more people coming back to it.
OK, well, for the moment, Catherine, thank you for that. But we'll be back to you, of course, as we see or hear any more developments with those talks underway. Not negotiations, as we've had the indication, but clearly hopes that something might come from that. Catherine, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's update you on those figures that we had on net migration. 504,000 coming in the past year. The population of Liverpool, but the Office of National Statistics indicating that included many people from Ukraine, from Afghanistan, and even from Hong Kong. But we remember that the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who was at the Home Affairs Select Committee yesterday, admitted that the government had lost control, effectively, of UK borders, but blaming migrants and people smugglers for many of the problems of the Channel with the overcrowding at the Manson Processing Centre. MPs heard that the Home Secretary, however, had been warned 4 times that keeping migrants at Manson could be breaking the law. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, spoke to GB News about this earlier today.
I saw that there was an exchange between Suella and a Conservative backbench colleague. I think it was the case that Suella explained clearly the situation. There are, as we know, routes which the UK generously maintains to allow people from Ukraine, from Hong Kong, from Afghanistan to come here, and British people have opened their hearts and their homes to people fleeing persecution in those areas. But we also have to maintain control. There is a balance here. One of the reasons why we can be generous towards people fleeing persecution in those areas is because the British people have the reassurance of knowing that they have a Home Secretary who, outside the European Union, will ensure that we don't accept free movement, that we do police our borders. Well, Suella in the House of Commons and also in the committee yesterday was clear that there are challenges which we need to address in our asylum system. And Suella, in her time in office, has made sure that the Manson Processing Centre is up and running now effectively after, again, there were challenges there because of the number of people who were coming over. We've also secured an arrangement with the French government, Suella and her opposite number in France, to better police the Channel. But there is more to be done in order to deal with the criminal gangs who are trading in human misery.
Well, that was Michael Gove a little earlier here on GB News. Let's just reflect that Downing Street is now saying that Rishi Sunak insisting he wants to bring down overall immigration. The Prime Minister's official spokesman saying unprecedented and unique circumstances had led to this rise. More than 144,000 people from Hong Kong, similarly from Ukraine, 22,000 from Afghanistan, pushing the figures up. But the Prime Minister is fully committed to bringing overall numbers down, said the spokesman. With our political reporter Olivia Utley is joining us now in the studio. Bit of an embarrassment, of course, for the government the day after Suella Braverman at that Home Office committee acknowledged that the UK perhaps had lost control of borders.
Yes, and it is quite serious as well for someone like Rishi Sunak, who voted for Brexit. And of course, there were those, particularly in London and in big metropolitan areas, who felt that Brexit was just a good way to seize control of the way we do immigration and were actually perfectly happy to have higher overall migration numbers. But I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of those who voted for Brexit wanted to see lower levels of net migration. And part of the reason, it seems, for this rise in the number of migrants coming over to Britain is because of Brexit. The new system, yes, it doesn't allow EU residents in automatically, but what it does allow is plenty of people from all over the whole world who have the right qualifications that we need. The other issue, of course, which does inflate the statistics somewhat, is, as you mentioned, the Hong Kong migration and Ukraine migration, which are sort of special circumstances which probably won't go on forever. But people aren't that interested in the specifics. What they see is that
The
net
headline
migration
figure.
figures are up
Yeah,
under Rishi Sunak as Brexit Prime Minister.
And this is the irony that obviously with no more freedom of movement of people across Europe, which is obviously why a lot of people decided to vote for Brexit, and yet we've got this record figure, 500,000, equivalent to the population of Liverpool. But a unique set of factors, says the ONS, Office for National Statistics, as does the Prime Minister's spokesman. So they're trying to sort of examine this as a one-off, maybe?
Yeah, they're trying to play it down by talking about those Ukraine figures, the Hong Kong figures, and also the fact that obviously travel has been opened up since the pandemic, and there will be lots of people who would have migrated to Britain in the last 2 years and basically weren't able to, who are doing so now. I mean, that said, there's no avoiding that a big part of this is that the way we do migration in this country has changed since Brexit, and that might, I mean, lots of experts suggested that that was going to bring up migration figures because you're getting people from all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to, as you said, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Hong Kong, we're being told a unique set of factors with students also coming from outside the EU, Indian and Nigerian students particularly. But the problem, of course, with the local authorities, I guess, more than the government, is that all these extra people have to be looked after in terms of health cover, in terms of accommodation. We had Mark White reporting on the problems about hotels and so on yesterday. There's a lot of added pressure on the systems.
Yes, and we already know that the systems are creaking. You've got a 7.1 million NHS waiting list.
Yeah.
Schools are overcrowded, and you've got Conservative MPs we saw the Conservative MP for Blackpool speaking to Mark White yesterday about the pressures that these migration is putting. Yeah, it's putting on these areas. So politically, it's very difficult for Rishi Sunak. He's going to have a lot of pushback from his own MPs.
Now, talking of political difficulties, you were all day for us outside from 7 in the morning, I think, the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh yesterday. You've thawed out, but relations in Edinburgh don't seem to be thawing out. Of course, we saw First Minister's questions. I don't know whether we'll be able to dip back in. A pretty feisty session there for Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, the decision has been made by the Supreme Court, but the politics seems to have re-erupted in some ways.
Absolutely. And actually, this was technically a victory for the UK government, but it feels as though it might be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory because you've got... What actually the UK government wanted is for the case to be thrown out.
Yeah.
Instead, what it's got is this victory. But now Nicola Sturgeon can claim that the UK government has put a deliberate constitutional roadblock in the way of Scottish democracy, which she's already doing. And instead of a sort of fudge of a situation where she's got no clear way forward, she now does have a clear way forward, which is to turn the next election into a de facto referendum and conflate the issues of independence and democracy and say that, look, Westminster is blocking our democracy, and so without independence, we can't have democracy, which she hopes is going to bring all sorts of former unionists round, because they want Scottish democracy.
Well, democracy is underway in Scotland, as we can see, because this is First Minister's questions there in Edinburgh going on at the moment. They've been talking about the problem of health. And this, of course, is the complication that people have pointed to. If you have a general election with all the other issues about the NHS in Scotland, about the ferries with the contracts being awarded there, how do you actually then interpret the result as a vote for independence?
Well, and I've spoken to a few Conservative MPs and MSPs who think that the answer is people just won't vote for the SNP in the next election. They know that there are all these massive, pressing domestic issues.
So it would actually
facing
backfire
Scotland.
on them in that case?
That's the theory.
Right.
That's what MPs are hoping. I spoke to one who was laughing at the idea of the SNP winning an election if they make it all about independence, because people are just too fed up, they think, with the situation domestically in Scotland to throw their weight behind Nicola Sturgeon. Again, although that's been said before, and so far Nicola Sturgeon seems to be a seriously good election winner.
Yeah, and she's quite a canny operator politically, but outside the chamber, quite angry scenes last night, indicating how divisive this is becoming in Scotland.
Oh, definitely. And we were outside Holyrood yesterday, and the scenes there, the fury from SNP supporters was really quite something. There was one, there's a pond outside Holyrood, and one supporter was so angry she fell in the pond, which was quite dramatic. But yeah, definitely the issue is very, very live up in Scotland.
Yeah. Olivia, thank you. First Minister's questions still going on, as we say, with The question, I think, at the moment of the NHS still uppermost, but we'll update you on reaction to that. Olivia, thank you very much indeed. You're watching GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Also coming up, the investigation into Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab and where that's going. But let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Hello there. For the rest of today, strong gusts, heavy rain tracking eastwards with blustery showers to follow and a lively evening, particularly towards the west. So let's have a look at the bigger picture. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure with this cold front, which is rather pokey. Some heavy bursts likely through the day as it tracks from the west towards the east. So you can see these brighter echoes representing that heavy rain moving towards the central spine of the country. By the evening, it'll be across eastern Scotland, eastern England, down towards the southeast. And then the winds pick up again further west. So there are wind and rain warnings in force throughout the day across Wales as well as central southern parts of England down towards the West Country. So through this evening, yes, a very windy one to come associated with that rain band. That rain band does clear though, but showers move in, particularly across Irish sea coast, western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, gusts up to 50, 60 miles an hour for a time and also gales. But then things tend to quieten down across England and Wales, a few showers lurking and always showery across central and northern western parts of Scotland as we enter Friday. It will be a chilly start to the day as well, with some sunshine coming through once the sun rises. But you can see here towards the northwest, showery bursts of rain throughout and also that strong wind. There will be a few showers further south and west, particularly across South Wales and the West Country, but brighter skies, breezy, but some sunshine coming through as temperatures rise after a cold start to around 10, 11, 12 degrees Celsius. So that's Friday. Into Friday night, many areas becoming dry, fewer showers across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland seeing one or two, and that leads into a cold start to Saturday. We're likely to see some mist and fog patches to start the day. Isolated frost also, and then more rain arrives, and that rain sweeps across the country, stores across the southeast as we head through to Sunday, and still breezy.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Let's update you a bit more. We're getting from Downing Street with the Prime Minister's spokesman saying Rishi Sunak still has full confidence in Dominic Raab. Deputy Prime Minister, of course, facing further questions and complaints about his conduct. Asked about the latest allegations, the Prime Minister's official spokesman saying we are not going to provide a running commentary on what is an independent, unrightly confidential progress. But the Deputy Prime Minister is actually facing these fresh questions over conduct. Several now senior civil servants and former staff said to be preparing formal bullying complaints against him. Indeed, it comes after Rishi Sunak yesterday appointed a senior lawyer to investigate the claims, which Dominic Raab says he will thoroughly rebut and refute. Let's get more now with our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who is at Westminster for us. And Tom, an indication that this inquiry by Adam Tolley, the lawyer, could actually be expanded to meet these new allegations coming forward.
Yes, this is a suggestion we first heard earlier this week when Number 10 gave indication that this could be an investigation not just into those two initial simultaneous complaints that came about in the middle of last week, but one broader in scope to bring in a number of further fresh complaints that have bubbled up in recent days. Of course, it's worth reminding ourselves that before Wednesday last week, not a single formal complaint had been lodged against Dominic Raab, and yet on the day of his Deputy Prime Minister's questions, Wednesday last week, two complaints were submitted about two different instances under two different departments, but issued on the same day. Mr. Raab pointed to the fact that these two were issued at the same time about different events by different people as perhaps something that may well be coordinated, something that may well, some people suspect, be political. But clearly he wanted to clear his name. He asked the Prime Minister to appoint this investigation into these complaints, and as of yesterday, of course, we learnt that Mr. Tolley KC would be conducting this investigation. But clearly the terms of the investigation are for the independent investigator and the Prime Minister to decide. After all, the Prime Minister is the ultimate arbiter of the ministerial code, but this investigation has a lot of purview within it to explore what it deems necessary. And of course, what we've been hearing in the last couple of days is more alleged complaints against the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. People saying that from their time working underneath him, they did not have the best of times. And there is a concern here from some within the Conservative Party that this is a sort of civil service that doesn't much like the Justice Secretary or his agenda, his British Bill of Rights and the rest of it, and that this is a civil service that is not used to be told to sort of work in a methodical way. That's one view of it, that Mr. Raab was simply asking for things to be done, demanding of his civil servants, yes, but not bullying. The other point of view is, of course, that he stretched beyond being demanding and into bullying. There are the allegations of a piece of tomato being thrown. There are the allegations of the use of the wrong tone with junior staff as well. But ultimately, this is what the independent investigation will be deciding, although perhaps with one caveat. Whilst this investigation is independent, is being carried out by a respected KC and does have the resources of the Cabinet Office within it, it will ultimately be for the Prime Minister to decide the recommendations of that report. The recommendations will be made for the Prime Minister, but it will be the Prime Minister to decide whether or not they're implemented.
Yeah, and indeed what action is taken. But, however, I mean, we reflect that Adam Tolley is a senior commercial and employment lawyer. And as you were indicating, many of these complaints appear to be coming from quite senior civil servants, not just junior staff, and across a number of government departments.
Yes, certainly. But the two initial complaints, one came from a senior civil servant at the Foreign Office and one from a senior civil servant at the Justice Department. Of course, two offices of state that Dominic Raab has held within the last year. Of course, it is important to note, however, that these were not lodged as formal complaints at the time. These were only lodged as formal complaints last week. So some people are raising eyebrows as to why now. There does seem to be a bit of a campaign against Dominic Raab, justifiably or otherwise, certainly within the media and within elements of the civil service. The people around Dominic Raab will be saying it's a bit suspicious that these complaints are only coming about now when the alleged incidents happened in some cases years ago. Other people will be saying it's only now that the civil servants have been feeling confident enough to go through the official processes to lodge these formal complaints. Ultimately, there are two sides to this story, and that's what Adam Tolley KC will be investigating in the coming days and weeks.
Tom, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Now, let's move on to Ofgem's energy price cap, which has been announced with the energy regulator today, and that cap reaching the equivalent of $4,279 a year for the average household from January. But, of course, with government support, average householders at the moment paying an average of $2,500 at an upper limit. But the extra cost to the government, well, that could double up to £5 billion a month because of this hike. Let's speak now to Helen Barnard, Associate Director at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, looking at helping people, of course, especially at the low economic scale. What is this telling us about energy bills, even though the government at the moment is still putting its hand in its pocket to help out?
I mean, I think it's telling us mainly that the wholesale price is still going up, is still driving this problem. And obviously, as you said, the government is protecting people from feeling all of it, but it is going to put more pressure on the public finances. The other thing it's worth saying is because it reflects that energy costs are still going up, other costs of other things like food, for instance, are also affected by energy costs. And we've seen enormous inflation in some of those essentials. So I think we'd expect to continue to see that pressure on people's budgets through those other living costs that energy feeds into.
And transport and so on. Now, we understand there will be a public information campaign now, which Liz Truss didn't want to happen. Some £25 million being spent on telling people what to do to actually lower their bills. Suggestions, of course, are lowering your boiler, thermostat, switching off devices onto standby. But, I mean, for many people, they're not even turning their electricity or their heating on anyway. So one wonders how effective this is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. It's what most other countries are doing, is pushing out that information so that people who can afford to have their heating and their energy on are still trying to save. And there's also obviously lots of public buildings that use energy, and hopefully we'll be seeing a kind of push across the public sector to reduce costs. But you're right, what we're already seeing is millions of people who can't afford the basics, and that includes using energy. You know, we've heard people who are turning off fridges, who are basically trying to use no energy at all because they just can't afford those bills. And of course, that has quite serious implications for people's health. And then one of the things that a lot of people are worried about is the pressure on the NHS this winter, with so many people who can't afford to stay warm and healthy, then ending up in the health system. Some people will, tragically lose their lives, but also it will just increase that pressure on A&E and on all the other bits of the health system, because we're going to see so many more people suffering because of that lack of heating.
Now, we had this situation with the doctors suggesting that there might be a system where not only that they help with food, parcels, and then even suggesting heating bills as getting a prescription from the doctor to help with that. I mean, a lot of people are thinking, what on earth is going on when a health service under pressure is being asked to sort of help with the social care as well?
I think, from what I understand of this scheme, it's not actually GPs that are doing that because they don't have time. There are other health workers who already do what's called social prescribing, so recommending things that will help that aren't medicine, and heating's part of that. I think there's probably two things about this, as a scheme to try and connect people who have an urgent need to get their heating on and to get things like home insulation done, as a way of prioritising finding those people. I think there's a lot of merit to this scheme. But I think you're right. It says if the health system is having to be the gateway to the basics of life, I think that tells us there is something fundamentally wrong in all the other systems that should stop people ever getting there. People should not be in a position where the only way to be warm is if you have a health condition that lets you access help. That should be a basic for everybody.
Helen, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on GB News once more. Thanks for your time. Coming up, those net migration figures, more than 500,000. We'll be unpicking where they're coming from and why they're coming as well, the highest level since the Second World War. First, an update on the news headlines with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. It's 12:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom, your top stories. Downing Street says the Prime Minister wants to bring immigration levels down after the number of migrants reaching the UK has hit its highest level since the Second World War. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows 504,000 more people moved to the UK than left in the year to June. It beats the previous highest record of 390,000 in 2015. Rishi Sunak's spokesman has said unprecedented and unique circumstances are behind the rise. 120 people have been arrested in the UK's biggest ever fraud sting. The global operation brought down a website which helped criminals scam thousands of victims out of millions of pounds. The site generated a spoof phone number which made it look as if calls were being made from banks, tax offices and other official bodies. Around 70,000 potential victims will now be sent a text message asking them to contact police. The RMT Union's General Secretary is holding talks with the Transport Secretary after announcing a fresh round of strikes over the festive period. On arrival, Mick Lynch said he's expecting a positive meeting with the Transport Secretary. Mark Harper, meanwhile, has said reform is vital and is urging all trade union leaders to get back around the table with employers. Ofgem has raised the energy price cap, which will come into force from the 1st of January. Without government support, the average household bill would hit over £4,200 a year. But the energy price guarantee means customers will pay £2,500 until April. Support has been promised for 18 months. Consultancy firm Cornwall Insight says it means the government could end up paying around £42 billion. Every school across Scotland is closed today, with teachers staging their first national strike in almost 40 years. Thousands of staff are demonstrating, calling for a 10% pay rise. Members of the Educational Institute of Scotland are warning of further industrial action if their demands aren't met. And postal workers are also striking today. The Communication Workers Union claims Royal Mail is trying to spin people into thinking it's modernising the service. It's calling for the government to intervene, saying the Postal Chief Executive has made negotiations difficult and should be sacked. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst, and it's time to head out to Doha and catch up on the latest with England's second group game against the USA tomorrow, kicking off, of course, at 7. And the good news is that Harry Kane has been fit to actually go out on the practice pitch. But let's get the latest from Qatar now with our reporter, Paul Hawkins. Paul, you're going to give us a bit of a sneak preview behind the scenes today. I gather you've moved away from the souk to one of the fan zones.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. We're in somewhere called Musharraf, which is, think of it like Doha's answer to Canary Wharf, but on a slightly grander scale. So very brand new buildings around here. And this area has been set up by FIFA. Think of it like a homage to South American football, which is very appropriate. We've got Brazil play. Well, there's Maradona, obviously. Just as I pointed to that saying Brazil, that's Maradona, obviously. This is the first World Cup since Maradona passed away. But Brazil are playing this evening against Serbia, and right now Uruguay are taking on South Korea. It's 0-0 in that one. But just to give you an idea of the fan experience in one of these small areas, over here we've got, you can kind of test your football manliness or womanliness if you want. Look, you can rock up here. In fact, there's a girl here just. Think of it like those punch machines in the fairs, but this is where kicking, so you can test out how fast you can kick the ball. And she's kicking it at 53 kilometres an hour. So there's a big queue here with chaps who are going to test just how hard they can strike the ball, which is pretty impressive. Ooh, that was a hard one, 80 kilometres an hour. And then if we walk just around the corner here, there's loads of stuff to see. There's this huge tree in the middle, big silver tree. Over here we've got Maradona himself looking a little bit static, it has to be said. And then you've got trophies in there and shirts. And then if we just come around here, if you don't know who that is, it's probably not worth explaining, to be honest. But let's just say he's one of the most famous footballers in the world. And then if we take a little wander around here, you've got the trophies here. The man told me he said they're the real thing. And I said, are they really? And he said, well, almost. So you've got like the replicas there, you've got the South American trophies there, got the World Cup there. And then over here there's a little mini cage area where you can look where you can come and test out your skills right here. And it's all free and it doesn't cost any money basically. So for anyone, you don't even have to have what they call a hire card, which is what you need to get into Doha. So these are the kind of experiences that are kind of on offer all around Qatar at the moment.
Right. We were very disappointed that you weren't going to try out and see what your kilometre per hour kicking ability was. However, we'll move on. Yes, you're going to say?
I was just going to say I'm really keen to, but there's a big queue and I don't want to start.
Yeah, no queue jumping. Quite right. So you don't have. Yeah, you don't have a Phil and Holly situation developing out there in Qatar. Anyway, let's just move on and talk about tomorrow, because Friday, of course, the day of prayer, and I gather there's been a little bit of unease about what happens about the alcohol situation and drinking before the lunchtime game for Wales tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a little bit of confusion over what's going to happen, especially with Friday prayers. as well. But what the host country would say is, look, whatever we say goes. You're in our country, you need to respect the customs and the laws here. And the people who live here, the expats who tend to be serving up the alcohol for the Welsh and the English and anyone else who wants alcohol, quite frankly, they tend to comply with the local laws. So whatever is said goes, to be honest, and we'll see how that pans out tomorrow.
On the pitch, Harry Kane looks fit. He's been at practice, everything looking good. So we may see a few goals again, given what we've seen on the pitch so far in this World Cup.
Yeah, you would have thought we should do. I mean, look, the USA are going to be more of a test than Iran, and clearly Harry Kane will play. It looks like he is fit. One of the key questions, though, for Gareth Southgate is Kyle Walker. Kyle Walker plays right back. He's had a groin injury. He's been out for quite a while. He is apparently ready and fit to play, but he's not what we call match fit. That is playing a match and making those decisions. Do I pass? Do I shoot? Do I receive? What do I do? Making those decisions instinctively without having to think about it. That's match fitness, and he hasn't been playing any matches. So does Gareth Southgate take a risk and play him? The pros are he's extremely fast, and you're going to need that against the USA. They're a very fast, quick, youthful side, one of, if not the youngest sides in the tournament. So having Kyle Walker there and his speed would be great, but obviously he won't be match fit. So that's one of the key decisions that Gareth Southgate will have to make. But England will be confident going into that match, given how they started against Iran.
Yeah, and of course, USA giving Wales quite a scare in that first half. But, Paul, for the moment, thank you. We'll let you go back and pose with your friend Pele back there. Thanks very much indeed. More, of course, from Paul in Doha throughout the tournament. Now, let's head back here with the local authority in Devon launching legal action against the government over the use of hotels to house asylum seekers. Well, Torbay Council says it plans to hand over a third hotel to migrants in Torquay, and that would result in increased pressure on local services there. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has been in Torquay to find out what's going on.
Calm seas off Torquay witnessed the international regatta, and whether it's red sails in the sunset or white sails at noon, it's always a charming picture.
The English Riviera has been the jewel in England's crown for years, entertaining holidaymakers from across the world. But there's a storm brewing. In recent weeks, 2 of Torquay's best-loved hotels have been requisitioned by the Home Office to house migrants fresh from the processing centre in Manston. Torbay Council thought that was it. They didn't expect a third hotel to be taken out of action. Torbay Council says it had a legitimate expectation that no other hotels in the area would be used. It also says that the Home Office hasn't taken into consideration the fact that this is a core tourism area. And they're also extremely concerned about the impact on children's services. The Esplanade Hotel in Paignton already houses migrants at a cost of £1.5 million a year. Of the 100 migrants that are said to be staying at the Esplanade Hotel here in Paignton, 20 of them have said that they're under the age of 18. And that creates another problem. It means that Torbay Council's Children's Services Department needs to get involved. Every person under the age of 18 on Torbay Council's radar requires monitoring, helping, safeguarding, and that costs. So when moves were made to turn a third hotel into an asylum seekers hostel, the council issued a pre-proceedings letter to the Home Office through their solicitors, demanding the third hotel should not be brought into operation. And just this week, the Home Office granted a stay of execution. Good news for the caretakers of the Maycliffe Hotel, who'd been told to pack their bags.
We just needed that extra time more than anything, just so we could find something suitable.
In a statement, the Home Office said, while we accept that hotels do not provide a long-term solution, they do offer safe, secure and clean accommodation, and we're working hard with local authorities to find appropriate accommodation during this challenging time. But safe for who? Roxanne and Miles had been told they had to leave before the migrants arrived because it wouldn't be safe for their children. They're concerned now for the elderly residents who live on the road.
Everybody needs to be bear in mind, they have a duty responsibility not only to the new people arriving in the country, but also to the people and the residents of the local area here already.
The halting of the plans is welcome news in Torquay, but no one knows how long the hiatus will last, if at all. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Now, we've got strike action happening in many places. Today it's the postal workers, thousands of workers beginning a 48-hour stoppage in the run-up to Black Friday tomorrow, of course, when we expect many deliveries. Talks between Royal Mail and the Communication Workers Union ending without an agreement so far. Deliveries being disrupted for 10 strike days in total. Of course, this is the busiest time of the year for the postal service. Royal Mail says it's made its best and final offer, accusing the union of holding Christmas to ransom. What does the union say? Well, joining us in the studio, Andy Fury, Assistant Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Thanks very much for coming in, Andy. And you are actually taking action today.
115,000 of our members on strike today and tomorrow.
So no deliveries and Black Friday tomorrow.
Absolutely.
That's a pointed stoppage, I guess.
Well, industrial action is aimed to cause this, disruption. It's aimed to bring pressure to bear on the employer to behave more reasonably. Our members don't want to be on strike, but they feel they've got no choice and no option in this matter.
Yeah, the pressure doesn't seem to be working so far. I gather the Post Office have, or the Royal Mail rather, has indicated that they've offered you a 9% deal over 18 months and a profit-sharing scheme, and that's it. Nothing else will be on the table.
Well, this dispute's a lot more than just pay. Our members are actually on strike over change today and tomorrow. There is a pay dispute as well running in parallel. Our members would gladly accept 9% over 18 months if it was really 9%. It's actually cloud cuckoo land. It's not 9%. 2% was imposed. Another 3.5% is on offer when an agreement's reached, not backdated, and a meagre 1.5% for April next year.
Right, OK. So basically it would be 5.5% at the moment with a top-up. Yeah. But what do you say is the cost to your... I'm just going to break away because I think Mick Lynch is also talking about the rail dispute.
Man is holding the country to ransom. He is a communist. He is anti-Christ. He wants nothing to do with the Bible or Jesus Christ.
Well,
He's against God. Now,
we have a slight interruption in the service. Mr. Lynch will be arriving at a platform near us in a moment. However, we clearly have someone who's going to a different destination, it seems, on his board there. Maybe he'll have his say, and then we can head back to hear what Mick Lynch has got to say. Catherine Forster, our correspondent, is there outside the Department of Transport. And I think we can actually hear from Mr. Lynch now. Let's head back there. No, Mick is still with us here as Andy, is still with us in the studio before we hear from Mick Lynch. There are parallels, of course, with what's happening with the trains in that you're saying the government really should take some kind of grip with these situations and get the employers to actually listen to worries about what's happening to work practices and modernisation and all those other issues.
Well, I think it's a bit deeper than that because Royal Mail actually declared a profit of £767 million in May this year. They also paid out dividends to shareholders of nearly 600 million. So they've gone from a very, very profitable company, it was record profits, and now they're losing 1 million a day. And that's happened almost overnight. The CW is saying this is gross mismanagement and heads should roll for this because the company has taken this industry, this customer service, from profit to loss overnight. Right, but somebody has to be responsible for that.
Is it also because we now have so many delivery firms who are taking over the parcels business, which is where the money is, rather than posting letters through the letterbox, and that you've actually fallen behind effectively with commercial competitors, and that's what's causing those losses?
Well, no, not really, because Parcel Force, which is an integral arm of the Royal Mail Group, and our Parcel Force members are on strike today as well.
So, right, yeah.
So they actually, they cover over 50% of the parcels market across the UK. So we're the single biggest parcel carrier. Our members up and down the length and breadth of the country deliver parcels day in, day out. And that is profitable. Yes, There's no doubt about it. But the reality here is Simon Thompson, as a CEO, is trying to attack over 10,000 of our members' jobs, and that's completely unacceptable.
I mean, is it the case, as Simon Thompson says, that your members aren't prepared to modernise and be more flexible in working practices? Not working on a Sunday, for instance, that the unions say that's not allowable.
We've got thousands of our members work every single Sunday, every single day of every year, every week of the year. The reality is we believe in modernisation, but it has to be changed for the good of the company, the good of the customer and the good of our members. The reality is they are driving this industry, this wonderful public service, into the ground.
Yeah, is that really the problem, that, you know, we talk about Royal Mail and the Post Office and we see it as an integral part of British culture such, but it is now being moved to being a commercial operation and therefore different rules maybe have to apply?
Well, the Post Office still remains publicly owned. Royal Mail was privatised over 10 years ago, so they are actually separate entities now.
Yeah.
But
they still have to mesh together, don't
Absolutely, they are integral to one another. The success of both are joined together. But the reality is, look, our members accept change, reasonable change. They're prepared to embrace new working practices, but it has to be reasonable. They're asking our delivery members to...
I think we can just hear from Mick Lynch. We'll be back to you in a moment.
Thanks for coming and thanks for the interest you're showing in these events. So we've just had a meeting with Mark Harper and his team. I would say it was a positive meeting in the sense that we've got rid of the bellicose nonsense that we used to have from Grant Shapps and his cohort in his era, and we're now starting to get a dialogue. So what we're hoping for and what Mr Harper has committed to is giving us an outcome from this meeting, which will be a letter to me saying how he sees us going forward and taking forward steps towards a resolution. And we laid out to him what we thought he should do, and he's acknowledged some of that. And what we're chiefly asking him to do, you've heard him say that he's going to be a facilitator towards a settlement or a resolution of the dispute. And we've said to him that it's no good having these warm words. We've heard them from his predecessor, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, but nothing actually happened. So we want him to set down in writing what he's going to do about the mechanics of how a resolution will be facilitated. Because at the moment, we've even got doubt about the authority of the people we're speaking to, who are called the Rail Delivery Group, and they are telling us they have no authority to negotiate. They do not have a mandate, and they've even put legal challenges to us as to whether they can negotiate at all. So we've got a situation where 14 train operating companies are telling us they can't negotiate, and so is their industry group, the Rail Delivery Group. So I've asked him to set out in writing and clarify what the authority of these people is. And I've asked him to create a liaison group or a liaison forum, however they term it, at ministerial level, so that the industry and ourselves as trade unions can go and see them, or at least liaise with them about how a settlement can come about. And we've also said to them, we need pace in these negotiations. I'm sure the public, the travelling public, and the businesses around the country and the economy wants to see this dispute settled in a proper way, but we need pace. 6 months we've been negotiating at least with the train operators, and we have had not one document put across the table. That has to change, and I outlined to him what his responsibilities are as we see them, and his responsibilities are legally in the contracts they have with these train operators. He's got a legal responsibility for industrial relations and a responsibility to set their mandate, i.e. what they can say, what they can offer, and what they can negotiate on at that table. So I'm hoping he's going to do that hopefully today, and we can get back to the table as he's been demanding in the media from me and from my union. But he needs to clarify in writing exactly where he stands and where the industry stands when they are transacting with us in those discussions. So they need a new position, they need a new mandate, and hopefully we can get on with it. And we'll be looking to do that immediately. We'll be talking to Network Rail in the morning, and as soon as the Rail Delivery Group invite us over, we'll be getting on with that. So that's where we are at the moment. It's up to him now to give us some documentation about how we're going to carry this forward.
Will you suspend the strikes?
Let's go.
Andy Bell 5 News. It sounds like that was quite a positive meeting. How about, as a sort of gesture, you call off the strikes before Christmas?
Well, we called the strikes off 2 weeks ago. We gave a 2-week period. It's gone past that now. It's nearly 2.5 weeks, where we were told we would get a tangible outcome. We would get commitments and proposals. We got none of that. So, once bitten, twice shy in that sense. We've also not had any strikes since the beginning of October. So there's been ample time for this lot to get their act together, along with their industry partners, as they describe them, people that they contract to run the railways, and they've done nothing. And we think their problem is that the Treasury is pulling their chain and they're not independent actors. Now, they've got to assert themselves as an independent department and get to grips with the crisis that's been created in our industry. Not just on strike days, but every day is a crisis in our railway. So we need to resolve the industrial dispute and also the organisational problems that has been created since privatisation.
Mick, Christian Hugo from LBC, it sounds like there's been a lot of admin today. Fundamentally, what our listeners we want to know is, are we any closer to these strikes being pulled off? It doesn't sound like that's the case.
No, we're no closer. We won't be any closer till we have a reasonable offer on the table that we can put to our members. He's not going to give me that offer. He's got to get his agents to do that. But they've got to sort out what their role is in this dispute. If they're going to negotiate with me, they have to have the authority to negotiate. At the minute, that authority has been withdrawn from them. So we've got a dispute here with employers who are not allowed to negotiate. He's got to clarify that in writing to us and perhaps to them, and that's his role. He is the facilitator, as he's now calling himself. So he's got to show us what that actually means, some mechanics of how this is going to progress, and some timelines of how we're going to progress the discussions. Who's next? Go on, let's go there. Hang on. Oh. Is Farage here? Because if he is, I'm not talking to you. No, there's no risk of that whatsoever. We have the complete support of our membership, as shown in the ballots. We have support from the public and even the travelling public using these trains. The people that have lost the credibility are this lot who are trying to run a railway through a level of incompetence we haven't seen before, and the train operators are only interested in profit. They made profit throughout COVID, and they made profit throughout these disputes, where they have been indemnified for every day of strike action. This lot in the Department for Transport have been paying all their costs, while all the businesses in London and all across this country have been suffering losses, while the train operators have had all of their revenue protected by this government. Right.
Mick,
is anyone from a normal outlet?
Yeah, Mick.
Rather than GB News?
Morning Star on here.
Yeah, go on. I asked them that precisely, and they couldn't give me an exact answer. It is being blocked because they can't provide answers to the employers. They say, and you've seen it last night on TV, that it's for the employers to negotiate. The employers say to me, across the table, at this distance, I cannot negotiate because I don't have a mandate. I have a mandate from my members, and I can tell you what it is. It's to secure their jobs, to secure conditions on an agreed basis, and to get a decent pay rise. The employers don't have that mandate. They don't even know what they can propose to me. That is a completely surreal situation where nobody knows what's going on when they enter a room. Everybody's demanding that I attend talks. I get an appointment to go to talks and they cancel it with 55 minutes notice and say we haven't got a mandate. Anyway, let's go around this way. Go on. I did put that to him. I've told him that the employers are telling us that the Department for Transport are the blockage. He is saying that that's not quite the case, but I will find out. So somebody's got to find out who is preventing proper negotiations leading to a proper settlement of this dispute. I don't care if we ever find out, as long as we get a way forward and then we can get on the business of running a railway and keeping our members and the public happy.
Mick, Ben from The Times, what are your concerns about the authority of the RDG? Do you just believe that they can make a deal, they can't make a deal?
I don't know. The RDG have convened these meetings. They've written to me saying they want to propose things on jobs, pay and conditions, but then they've got their lawyers, Eversheds, to write to me saying they're not in collective bargaining and they cannot do collective bargaining. And then I get the employers, the 14 employers, writing to me saying we're not in collective bargaining either. So this is a completely strange and surreal situation where nobody wants to. I'm responsible for my union and I stand in front of you and take whatever you want to throw at me. Nobody from the employers is prepared to stand in front of me and take the responsibility for settling this dispute. That's what we need. We need somebody of authority, which has to start with the Secretary of State and the Rail Minister, who I want to work with and work with positively, to take the responsibility for settling this dispute. At the moment, we're riding a bicycle without any pedals.
So
it's ridiculous.
Discussions with the Network Rail are further progressed than with the 14 train
Well,
companies.
Network Rail have at least made an offer, and I've asked the Secretary of State to give them more licence, to unshackle them, to get into proper negotiations, to put some stuff across the table that they know that we can develop, because what they've put across the table at the minute is completely unacceptable to the men and women who run the railway.
Can your members afford to carry on striking it? They're literally losing thousands of pounds.
Well, nobody can afford to go on strike, but our members are fully committed to the action because they've just voted for it in very heavy numbers through the anti-trade union laws that your newspaper campaigns for to suppress human rights and civil liberties in this country. Anyone else?
It's a bit unfair, isn't it, to carry on asking striking when they're literally losing, what, £2,000-3,000?
Well, we've asked them for a ballot, which you support, and they've answered that question through that ballot.
Mick, Simon Calder from The Independent. What's your advice to passengers who are hoping to travel in December and January and indeed want to plan anything with more than 2 weeks' notice, which of course they can't do because another strike might be called?
My advice is to get in touch with your MP, chiefly the Conservative MPs, that are holding out for the suppression of trade unionists and the suppression of wages and terms and conditions in this country, and urge those MPs to get these ministers to get us a settlement in this dispute so we can get the railways back to normal and we can have the services running freely and properly over the Christmas period. All right? Well, we'll deal with that in negotiations. You lot in the media are obsessed by pay rises. My members are telling me, you've got to secure me my job and you've got to get me a set of terms and conditions that are acceptable, and then we can talk about what we're getting paid. If you haven't got a job, you don't get a pay rise anyway, and if you get a set of terms and conditions that are intolerable, you probably won't want to keep that job in the first place. So when we settle the important issues about who's going to work on the railway, how we're going to run the railway, then we can work out what we're going to pay the people that are operating it on our behalf. Right.
More people would be happy to leave Network Rail than they're actually looking to move. So they say that there isn't an issue about job security.
Well, we'll settle the issue of job security, but they've got to work out what their organisation is. It's all right saying who wants to leave. You've got to work out who it is that you need to leave, who you need to retain, and how the industry is going to be organised. They haven't really got a coherent plan to do that, and they certainly haven't got a coherent plan that allows our members to have a decent work-life balance. And they haven't got a plan that ensures the safety of the railway, because their plans are predicated on the idea that you cut jobs, and the way to do that, you cut 50% of the maintenance inspections on the railway. That's not acceptable with the way that the railway's been constructed recently and the accidents that we've had due to weather and all the rest of it. We need boots on the ground looking after our railway with proper terms and conditions. Right, anyone else? Say that again, to set up what? Yeah. So he's committed to writing to me, hopefully this afternoon, setting out how he sees it. I've given you my version, I accept that. But what I've learned as a negotiator, there's a big difference between what comes out of the mouth and what gets written down with the pen. So we'll have to see what he says. I'm hoping that he will be constructive and that we will have direct ministerial involvement in monitoring this process. I don't expect him to be at the table with me. He's probably had enough of me for today and for the future. But we've got to work in a sense that they're engaged in the process, that they're enabling their agents, the employers, to have a proper process with us so we can get an outcome. Now, he's going to set that down in writing and we'll see what it says. I'm hoping to. That's what we suggested to him, and he didn't say no, and he said he'll consider it and he'll set down his position after this meeting. All right?
Yes,
go on.
You said you're not going to be the Grinch. Why not play Santa for the passengers, an early Christmas present, and if not call off these 3 Christmas strikes and move them to another day?
Because if we call off the strikes, we'll never get a settlement. We did that 2 weeks ago. We've changed our dates in response to public opinion. when the Queen passed away, when we had the Poppy Day, we've done other things. We have not had a strike for 7 weeks, and nothing has happened. So anyone that's been involved in industrial relations knows that there's got to be leverage and pressure at the table from both sides, and that will create the compromises and the resolutions that we're all looking for. If I take these actions off without any outcome, my members won't forgive me for doing that, and we know that the pressure will be off all the parties, including us, because we've got pressure on us as well, and we want to get to a settlement. And I've given a commitment to my members, until we get a tangible outcome that they can consider, the action will remain on. Now, the quicker we get to dealing with that, the better for everyone. Okay? All right? Are we all right, John? Okay. See you all soon. Have a good day.
Mick Lynch from the RMT after talks with the Transport Secretary Mark Harper, or as Mick Lynch was indicating, now a facilitator. And Mr Lynch saying that the talks were positive, no more bellicose nonsense, as he said, as he heard from Grant Shapps. We are getting a dialogue. He now wants a letter or written confirmation from the Transport Secretary on how he sees things going forward. Mick Lynch indicating that talks with the rail delivery group, the 14 different rail companies, that they were saying they did not have a mandate to actually discuss or to raise a settlement or indeed to do any kind of negotiation. So Mr Lynch indicating he wanted an indication from Mark Harper how that would be going forward, but Mr Lynch adding that if we call off the strike, we will never get a settlement. So at the moment, the strikes are still in place, but clearly indications that there is some kind of dialogue going on. Let's get more with Catherine Foster, who is actually... No, not quite yet. We'll speak to her in a moment. But Andy is still here in the studio. Andy Fury from the CWU with the strike on postal services, with some parallels, one has to say, what's going on with rail. You were nodding your head there when he was indicating that there has to be something to back up the words of government. Now, you're in a very different position in a way, in that you still have this public remit to provide a service, and yet you're dealing with a private company. So how would a government help you in that situation to, well, knock heads together, maybe some would say?
Well, it's a fascinating question, because there is a universal service obligation, which we fundamentally believe in. It's about providing one customer service, universal price, across the whole of the UK. So our members deliver to 32 million addresses 6 days a week, and we want to defend that service and actually utilise that service to build new products, new services, new income streams. We think there needs to be a leveraging of that unique offer, and we think there should be an ambition from the Royal Mail Board to actually seek to grow and build the Royal Mail services.
Right. Well, given that undertaking, and obviously that you are a public utility in a way, even though it's a private company, should the government be helping out as well in terms of negotiations?
Well, we think there should certainly be a public inquiry to look at how things have gone so badly wrong. We believe it's gross mismanagement. And just to put this into context, there's 11,000 plus agency workers operating in Royal Mail, and that has been for a considerable period of time. Now, if Royal Mail want to save money, they should dispense with the services of those agency workers and invest in their directly employed workforce, who, after all, have given loyal, dedicated service for many years.
OK, so 48-hour stoppage at the moment. What's next then in line if you don't get any kind of breakthrough?
Well, we remain available for talks.
Right.
Dave Ward, our General Secretary, and myself are available for talks tomorrow, and indeed over the weekend and early next week. If we can't achieve a breakthrough, then we go again next Wednesday and Thursday with another 48-hour strike. We don't want to take strike action. Our members don't want to be on strike, but they know that they have to stand up to this aggressive employer who's after destroying this industry and their jobs.
Andy Fury, thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Let's turn from one dispute to another. We were hearing about what Mick Lynch has been talking about with the Transport Secretary. Catherine Foster, our correspondent, was there bowling the questions. And an indication that there may be some kind of dialogue, even though it's not a negotiation, as he said, with the Transport Secretary.
Yes, well, initially when Mick Lynch emerged, one of the first words he used was positive. He said it would have been a positive meeting in contrast to the bellicose nonsense that they'd had from the previous Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, who, of course, had refused to talk to them. So positive in that sense, but He said they were starting a dialogue that Mark Harper, he's asked Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, to put in writing to him later today steps towards resolution that the Transport Department can facilitate negotiations between the unions and the employers. He said he pointed out the legal responsibility for industrial relations and to set a mandate for employers that he says the Transport Secretary has. So positive in that they are talking. Now he's still maintaining that the government had ultimately blocked a deal being put forward the other day, and the government are saying that's not quite correct. But I wouldn't hold your breath for any resolution anytime very soon. And in the meantime, these strikes beginning mid-December, potentially right through till early January. There's also a ban on overtime during the Christmas period itself. There's also about 300 planned engineering works. So it does look like travel over the Christmas period may be very difficult, but we have to hope that something may come of this meeting in the coming days.
And Mick Lynch making the point that obviously they had called off action when told they would get commitments. He said those commitments weren't forthcoming, but indicate if we can call off a strike, we'll never get a settlement. So he's still holding the government to account over this.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, they have cancelled strikes before, but obviously they realise that Christmas is an emotive time, isn't it? Because for the last 2 years, a lot of families haven't had a proper Christmas because of COVID, haven't been able to travel to see loved ones. So to choose to have strikes at that time of year, particularly, I think they realise gives them power. I did ask him if, given that lots of people are going to have to make other arrangements, it may drive people ultimately away from the railways if they feel that they can't rely on getting trains, and that all they really need is far more people coming onto the trains. They're going to shoot themselves in the foot. Of course, he denied that. But difficult times ahead, but let's hope that something may give in the coming days.
And just to pick up on one last point, Catherine, which is quite important, indicating that talks with Network Rail were going to be held in the morning. And, of course, the signalling staff are also RMT members. And, again, this affects the whole of the network, not just the separate train operating companies.
Yes, signalling staff are going to be on strike. Network Rail staff are going to be on strike, and a number of the train operators. So it does sound, in previous strikes, about 20% of trains have been able to operate, but it does sound like it potentially could be even worse than that, because of course if you have signal workers are utterly critical. So yes, very difficult. And of course this is just one more looming strike. We've got Scottish teachers on strike today. We've got a 2-day Royal Mail strike affecting Black Friday, which of course is tomorrow. Teachers' strikes looming elsewhere in the country, nursing strikes. It's a very difficult picture for the government that is desperate to keep wage settlements down.
Catherine, thank you very much for that at the Department of Transport. And indeed, as we've just been discussing, are we indeed facing a winter of discontent? Certainly, it's looking like it with those strikes rippling through British workforce, as Catherine was saying, from nurses to civil servants, postal workers and rail workers. Most in disputes over pay and working conditions. Well, Britain has been here before in a more severe way, back in the 1970s, when the UK coined the term. Inflation spiralling, society becoming more fractious, widespread strikes then driven by powerful trade unions, covering more than half the workforce. Joining us now to discuss that, Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor with On the Money. It is different days, even though some of us remember them well. Yeah. Because the powerful unions then are nowhere nearly as powerful now, and they don't have the membership. However, as we've seen with what Mick Lynch is saying, you know, if we call off the strike, we'll never get a settlement. They are saying they still have to have this industrial push to get things achieved, they say.
The numbers are interesting on this, Mark. Back in the day, in the late 1970s, and we remember as kids, don't we, the power cuts.
3-day week.
Could have them again now. We remember the industrial action always featuring on television news. I don't know about you, that's when I really became interested in news, when I saw the sort of economic fallout from politics and so on. Back then, as you rightly say, just over half the British workforce was unionised. There was a lot more nationalised industries and so on. And now it's about 25% of the workforce is unionised. But in the public sector, it is about 50%. And the public sector unions are, at the moment, increasingly militant, increasingly likely to go for strike action. We're hearing about nurses striking. We've got university lecturers striking today, tomorrow and Wednesday. The RMT, they're a private sector union, but our railways are a kind of semi-public, semi-private...
Yes, British Rail in those days.
Hybrid, aren't they? Because people expect... you just talked to Catherine about holding the government to account. People kind of expect the government to step in, even though we're talking about private rail operators. So there is still a high degree of unionisation. And when
in
you
the
get...
public sector,
When you get high inflation, and we've obviously got inflation at a 41-year high, that is similar to the 70s. In some senses, inflation now is worse than in the 70s under some definitions. Then you get pay lagging inflation. Then you get real wage constriction. Then unions start getting militant. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and that's the parallel, of course, with the 1970s, that we've not seen this inflation for many decades. But the other aspect, and we were speaking to Andy Fury about this with the Communication Workers Union, is that we've got these public bodies, or at least public services, but they are privately owned now, effectively. So the Royal Mail basically is trying to be a commercial operation, but it's in a situation where it was still doing the job it was in the 1970s.
This was always the issue, wasn't it? And again, this goes back to the debates we were having in the 70s and the 80s. When you privatise these essentially public goods, these public services, like the railways, they're basically a natural monopoly, as we say in economics. Like the Postal Service, in some senses, it's not as much of a monopoly as it was back then, because we've got the internet, we've got a lot more private sector postal services. You've got the whole network of Amazon and the tech retail giants. They don't use Royal Mail. So Royal Mail is being challenged. But it is really, really difficult. And I think a real parallel with the 70s, we've had an energy price shock, just as we had energy price shocks in the 70s. Talk about energy security and geopolitical strife, just like we had in the 70s. We've got that again now. But I think we understate the extent to which it's similar to the 70s, because a lot of people, rightly, like you just did, say, but the unions aren't as serious as they were back then. No, they're not. But where they are serious, they're serious. And I do think we're going to see more public sector strikes in the weeks and months ahead.
And where does this leave the government? And, I mean, the phrase, remember the 1970s, crisis, what crisis? So Jim Cameron never actually said that.
He never actually said that.
But the government's indicating that the Treasury is really saying, look, you just cannot agree to these price or the pay rises because of the price inflation that brings through the system.
So the nurses want 17%. I mean, way above inflation, but they would say we haven't had a decent pay rise for a long time. Public sector workers, may well get, inflation-linked settlements. I mean, we've just had inflation-linked settlement on the basic state pension, right? That cost 11 billion quid. But because you've got this contrast at the moment between a public sector which is heavily unionised and a private sector that isn't heavily unionised, in a way it could become even more fractious than it did in the 70s. I don't wish to be alarmist or catastrophist. It just strikes me that there is that real schism now between the public and the private sector. So whereas in the past, and I remember this, listening to conversations in what we used to call working men's clubs back in the 70s, you'd get private sector workers, they would support the public sector workers. They'd often strike in sympathy, wouldn't they, when laws allowed that kind of sympathy.
Secondary picketing and
all of that stuff. I don't think you're going to get that now. The public sector unions will strike, and there will be some buy-in from some members of the public for a while, but I think the 4/5 of the workforce in the private sector, 4/5 compared to a fifth in the public sector, I think they'll be less patient with the public sector strikers. And that's why I wonder that politics could yet become a lot more fractious as you get more public sector strikes in the weeks and months ahead.
And those people who aren't union members can't get to work on the trains to...
That's right.
Liam, as ever, thank you for that. More, of course, on that as we get it. But just to reiterate, Mick Lynch indicating talks on the rail strike positive. None of that bellicose nonsense, he said, waiting now for written confirmation from the Transport Secretary on the way ahead. We're also coming up, talking about Dominic Raab and those bullying claims. Rishi Sunak appointing a lawyer to investigate the allegations, saying, though, he does have full confidence in Mr Raab. Let's take a look at the weather first.
Hello there. For the rest of today, strong gusts, heavy rain tracking eastwards with blustery showers to follow and a lively evening, particularly towards the west. So let's have a look at the bigger picture. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure with this cold front, which is rather pokey. Some heavy bursts likely through the day as it tracks from the west towards the east. So you can see these brighter echoes representing that heavy rain moving towards the central spine of the country. By the evening, it'll be across eastern Scotland, eastern England, down towards the southeast. And then the winds pick up again further west. So there are wind and rain warnings in force throughout the day across Wales as well as central southern parts of England down towards the West Country. So through this evening, yes, a very windy one to come associated with that rain band. That rain band does clear though, but showers move in, particularly across Irish sea coast, western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, gusts up to 50, 60 miles an hour for a time and also gales. But then things tend to quieten down across England and Wales, a few showers lurking and always showery across central and northern western parts of Scotland as we enter Friday. It will be a chilly start to the day as well, with some sunshine coming through once the sun rises. But you can see here towards the northwest, showery bursts of rain throughout and also that strong wind. There will be a few showers further south and west, particularly across South Wales and the West Country, but brighter skies, breezy, but some sunshine coming through as temperatures rise after a cold start to around 10, 11, 12 degrees Celsius. So that's Friday. Into Friday night, many areas becoming dry, fewer showers across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland seeing 1 or 2, and that leads into a cold start to Saturday. We're likely to see some mist and fog patches to start the day. Isolated frost also, and then more rain arrives, and that rain sweeps across the country, stores across the southeast as we head through to Sunday, and still breezy.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary Dominic Raab facing fresh questions over his conduct, with several senior civil servants and former staff now reported to be preparing formal bullying complaints against him, coming after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak yesterday appointed a senior lawyer to investigate claims, which Dominic Raab says he will thoroughly rebut and refute. Let's get more with our political correspondent Tom Harwood, joining us at Westminster. And Tom, Rishi Sunak taking the time and trouble to saying he still had full confidence in Mr Raab. That's usually not a very encouraging sign for someone to have the Prime Minister to do that to you.
Well, no, that usually means a journalist has asked the question, do you have confidence in an individual? And that would lead to people suspecting that there was something to question over the confidence a Prime Minister may have in a minister or otherwise. But clearly, this is a moving situation. Yesterday, the Prime Minister appointed Adam Tolley Casey, I should say, the senior employment lawyer, to go through this case. Of course, last Wednesday, the Deputy Prime Minister referred himself to Rishi Sunak over these two complaints that were made last week. Complaints dating back to his first time as Foreign Secretary and first time as Justice Secretary, so before the summer, of course. And these complaints were lodged last week off the back of a bit of a media row over whether or not Dominic Raab had been bullying the people that were working for him in his various departments. Now, there had been media stories of a piece of tomato flying across the room and harsh language or harsh tone, I should say, being used by the Justice Secretary and the then Foreign Secretary, and yet there weren't any formal complaints lodged. That changed last week ahead of Deputy Prime Minister's questions, when those complaints were lodged, and subsequently this search for an investigator began. The investigator was picked yesterday, and the terms of reference for that investigation are now underway. It's under the auspices of the Cabinet Office. It has investigatory powers, and ultimately it will make recommendations to the Prime Minister, the ultimate arbiter of the ministerial code, as to what sort of punishment, if indeed a punishment is decided, may well happen. Because we must remember in all of this, this is contested. Dominic Raab maintains that he didn't do anything that could be constituted as bullying, and yet some senior civil servants say the opposite.
And what weight should we add to the fact that it's reported they are senior civil servants that are making these latest allegations? It's not just his junior staff.
Yes, we understand that private secretaries are drawing up complaints this week, which does suggest that this is a level of seriousness. However, on the other hand, it may well suggest that if these are very senior people who know the ways of the civil service, know the complaints procedures within the civil service, the question may well be asked, why did they not lodge their formal complaints at the time of the alleged incidents? These complaints have been taking place over the last 8 days, well after the incidents are alleged to have taken place, of course, in previous years. So perhaps Dominic Raab has something going for him under the assumption that these are sort of after the fact complaints, and they seem to be coming after a bit of a political campaign in the media. However, other people may well say that there were sort of informal things said at the time, and it's only now that perhaps courage could be plucked up to submit formal complaints. These are contested ideas, and ultimately that's why there is now an investigation by a senior KC.
Yeah. Tom at Westminster, thank you very much indeed for that. And the GB News Grim Reaper behind you seems to have skedaddled all the way from the Department of Transport. Been a very busy morning for him. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, he's on his way now. No, he's turning the page. Anyway, you shall be saved, Tom. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace has announced the King is to spend Christmas Day at Sandringham. That coming through to us. The royal family marking their first Christmas, of course, since the death of the late Queen, by returning to tradition. Sandringham, always the place for Christmas. During the COVID pandemic, of course, the Queen had spent 2 Christmases at Windsor Castle in a row. Because of the COVID restrictions, became known as HMS Bubble. But we are being told that many other members of the royal family likely to join the King for a traditional Christmas. Coming up, more on migration, hitting 500,000 in the past year, according to the Home Office. But let's get the news update now with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. It's coming up to 32 minutes past 1, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of migrants reaching the UK has hit its highest level since the Second World War. The data from the Office for National Statistics shows 504,000 more people moved to the UK than left in the year to June. It beats the previous record of 390,000 in 2015. The ONS says the sharp rise has been driven by unprecedented events, including the war in Ukraine and the end of COVID restrictions. Downing Street says the Prime Minister's committed to bringing overall numbers down. 120 people have been arrested in the UK's biggest ever fraud sting. The global operation brought down a website which helped criminals scam thousands of victims out of millions of pounds. The site generated a spoof phone number which made it look as if calls were being made from banks, tax offices and other official bodies. Around 70,000 potential victims will now be sent a text message asking them to contact police. The RMT has asked the government for help in resolving its dispute with train companies. The union's General Secretary Mick Lynch has been holding talks with the Transport Secretary after announcing a fresh round of strikes over the festive period. He described the meeting with Mark Harper as positive and says he's now seeking reassurance in writing.
We won't be any closer till we have a reasonable offer on the table that we can put to our members. He's got to clarify that in writing to us and perhaps to them. And that's his role. He is the facilitator, as he's now calling himself. So he's got to show us what that actually means, some mechanics of how this is going to progress and some timelines of how we're going to progress the discussions.
And teachers across Scotland are staging their first national strike in almost 40 years. Thousands of staff are demonstrating, calling for a 10% pay rise. Members of the Educational Institute of Scotland are warning of more industrial action if their demands aren't met. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2113 and €1.1632. The price of gold is £1,449.34 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,470 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. We'll be discussing the migration figures in a moment. But first, a local authority in Devon's launched legal action against the government over the use of hotels to house asylum seekers. Torbay Council in Devon says plans to hand over a third hotel there to migrants in Torquay would result in increased pressure on local services. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has been in Torquay to find out what's going on.
Calm seas off Torquay witnessed the international regatta. And whether it's red sails in the sunset or white sails at noon, it's always a charming picture.
The English Riviera has been the jewel in England's crown for years, entertaining holidaymakers from across the world. But there's a storm brewing. In recent weeks, 2 of Torquay's best-loved hotels have been requisitioned by the Home Office to house migrants, fresh from the processing centre in Manston. Torbay Council thought that was it. They didn't expect a third hotel to be taken out of action. Torbay Council says it had a legitimate expectation that no other hotels in the area would be used. It also says that the Home Office hasn't taken into consideration the fact that this is a core tourism area. And they're also extremely concerned about the impact on children's services. The Esplanade Hotel in Paignton already houses migrants at a cost of £1.5 million a year. Of the 100 migrants that are said to be staying at the Esplanade Hotel here in Paignton, 20 of them have said that they're under the age of 18. And that creates another problem. It means that Torbay Council's Children's Services Department needs to get involved. Every person under the age of 18 on Torbay Council's radar requires monitoring, helping, safeguarding, and that costs. So when moves were made to turn a third hotel into an asylum seekers hostel, the council issued a pre-proceedings letter to the Home Office through their solicitors, demanding the third hotel should not be brought into operation. And just this week, the Home Office granted a stay of execution. Good news for the caretakers of the Maycliffe Hotel, who'd been told to pack their bags.
We just needed that extra time more than anything, just so we could find something suitable.
In a statement, the Home Office said, while we accept that hotels do not provide a long-term solution, they do offer safe, secure and clean accommodation, and we're working hard with local authorities to find appropriate accommodation during this challenging time. But safe for who? Roxanne and Miles had been told they had to leave before the migrants arrived because it wouldn't be safe for their children. They're concerned now for the elderly residents who live on the road.
Everybody needs to be bear in mind, they have a duty responsibility not only to the new people arriving in the country, but also to the people and the residents of the local area here already.
The halting of the plans is welcome news in Torquay, but no one knows how long the hiatus will last, if at all. Jeff Moody, GB News.
So that's the situation down in Torbay in Devon. What about the wider picture across the UK? Well, the Home Office has now confirmed that net migration has hit more than 500,000 people for last year, an estimated 504,000 more people coming into the UK than leaving in 2021, the highest since the Second World War. The previous record, 390,000, set in 2015, before Brexit. Well, joining us now to discuss the issue, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, of course, who was in Blackpool yesterday, telling a very similar story to situation there in Torbay. But this is now the bigger picture, the whole number of people, not just illegal migrants and asylum seekers, but net migration as such. And the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, saying there are particular factors, which means this is really a record number.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that, is happening regardless of what the particular factors are this year is that it is going up year after year, effectively, but it is significantly higher now. Those factors include the Ukrainian war, the fact that 200,000 Ukrainian citizens have been granted visas to come here.
And were welcomed here.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Also, tens of thousands who've come from Hong Kong, 80,000 odd who've come from Afghanistan as well. Add that into the very significant rise in student visas that are being granted, 476,000
wow.
over the last 24 months. They did it over 2 years, one of the years taking in the pandemic, so that was a lower year anyway.
Yeah. Now, this is interesting because, of course, one of the big issues about Brexit was to stop the free movement of people across the EU. These students are coming from outside the EU, ONS indicating to a large number of Indian students coming in, Nigeria as well. But the issue, of course, is that whoever comes in, they have to be looked after by local authorities. And as we've seen in Blackpool with your report and Torbay with Jeff, you know, they really are under strain just to physically look after people.
Yeah, I think those that have concerns about overall migration and concerns that it is not manageable in the country, not because people aren't welcome, but just because there isn't the infrastructure and resources to deal with that. And we've had many years now of austerity being reversed, but of course now we're back into another economic crisis where individual government departments and therefore councils as well are going to have to manage their budgets, and they're dealing with more in the education system, more using health services, more using all of the kind of wraparound services that councils provide.
Just to physically look after people.
And when you're talking about a city, Mark, that is the
size of Liverpool?
Well, exactly, an influx of people the size of Liverpool, and that's happening in effectively 1 year. It is an enormous amount of people coming into the country, double the amount that we would normally get.
What about the political fallout then? Because we had Suella Braverman at Home Office committee yesterday acknowledging that basically UK had lost control of borders, specifically talking about perhaps the boat issue coming across with illegal migrants. But then Rishi Sunak was also pressed on what he thought would be an acceptable number in terms of net migration. Suella Braverman talking about 100,000 being a ideal number. I mean, this is politically embarrassing for the government, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Suella Braverman talking about, 100,000 or less is going back to, you'll remember David Cameron when he first took office, saying we want to get net migration down to the tens of thousands. In other words, under 100,000. So she has gone back, in her mind anyway, to those particular days. But one of the reasons, we're told, actually underlying the fallout that she had with Liz Truss was over her determination to get net migration down and a Liz Truss government determination to push forward with more immigration to help boost that economy. Now, it's unclear exactly, as you say, from what Rishi Sunak is saying, what exactly he wants to do. What is the goal of this government? Does it need many more people to drive the economy forward, or is it actually trying to get the numbers overall down?
Yeah.
Well, they've leapt, and they've leapt very significantly. Biggest increase since the Second World War.
Going to keep you busy for a day or two analysing all the figures.
Just a day or two.
Yeah. Mark, thank you very much indeed for that. And, of course, more reaction as we get it. But let's reflect that the government, Department of Transport, been in talks with Mick Lynch with the RMT union earlier, discussing those rail strikes in the run-up to Christmas and the New Year. The union announcing 48-hour stoppages, 4 days in December, 4 days in January, and a ban on overtime causing more problems. Well, they accuse the government of deliberately preventing any progress in the negotiations. But let's get more now with travel expert Simon Calder joining us. Simon, we're hearing from Mick Lynch indicating that perhaps it was more positive, not the bellicose nonsense, as he said, with Grant Shapps, but really this interesting picture he was drawing about when they talked to the rail operating group, the 14 rail companies, they had been telling him they didn't have a mandate to negotiate on any of this.
Yes, and this has been an absolute mess. On Monday, you'll recall, as you say, they called an astonishing 8 days of strikes designed to cause absolute maximum disruption before Christmas and into the new year, with an overtime ban running right through the festive season. And they did that, I think, out of frustration. They said that a meeting with the train operators had been called off at 55 minutes notice because, quotes, the train operators weren't allowed to come up with with negotiations. Now, they laid the blame strongly on the Department for Transport behind me, on the new Transport Secretary, Mark Harper. And the meeting today, I was really struck when Mick Lynch came out. He did seem to be in a more conciliatory mood, given his comments, though, for the last but one Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. He seemed to be much more intent on reaching a settlement, and said that there'd been progress. They were expecting to get some formal statements from the Transport Secretary within the next 24 hours, possibly even overnight, and that they would go forward on the basis that they would be trying to reach a settlement. But it has been extremely messy, and of course, meanwhile, millions of us are hoping to travel over Christmas and the New Year. Don't know where we stand. All we do know is that there's definitely a strike this coming Saturday involving a different union, ASLEF, the train drivers. Their members are walking out at 11 train operators, and the rail delivery group says do not attempt to travel unless you absolutely have to. Having said that, there will be thousands of trains running on unaffected train operators.
Yeah, although we've obviously got this overtime ban as well. I mean, another positive aspect, Mick Lynch indicating that talks with Network Rail in the morning, because, of course, it's signalling staff as well, that members of the RMT. But, I mean, the other problem on Network Rail, we're being told that we've got all these engineering works over Christmas and the New Year, which seems to happen every year when people are trying to get to see families across the festive season.
Oh, sure, yeah, and this might actually be the very last Christmas and New Year that we get all those. They have been a standard fixture for as long as anybody can remember. We've had more figures out actually this morning, Mark, showing that people aren't travelling nearly so much during the week. They are travelling much more at weekends and for leisure. And so we've got, for instance, Merseyrail saying they're going to bring back Boxing Day trains. And I think gradually over the festive season we will see moving towards a sort of proper 365-day railway. At the moment, though, exactly as you say, there will be disruption, particularly on the West Coast main line through the festive season, and that's even without any train strikes and overtime bans. So the hope is that we will get back to something like a normal railway, as good as or as bad as that might be. And I feel personally more optimistic about it now, having spoken to Mick Lynch in the past hour, than I have done for many months. I think we're possibly on the brink of a settlement. But of course, at the moment, as things stand, strike on Saturday definitely going ahead, and 8 more days of strikes that we don't know about yet.
Merry Christmas. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll see what emerges in the days ahead. It might be a bit of a present for us all. Simon, thanks very much as ever for your time. Now, not long to go until England's second group game against the USA tomorrow, kicking off at 7 in the evening, and Wales, of course, lunchtime. Good news for England, though. Manager Gareth Southgate saying Harry Kane will be fit to play. Let's get the very latest from Doha with our reporter Paul Hawkins, because, Paul, Harry's been out on the practice pitch. No problems with that ankle, it seems.
Yeah, which is great news for England, Mark, given that the USA are going to pose more of a challenge than Iran. So you want all your players fit. Harry Kane didn't score in that match against Iran, although he did get involved in assisting a few of those goals. He's an integral part of the team. He's the captain, so you want him fit for the USA, and he will be. In fact, everyone pretty much looks like they're fit. Harry Maguire came off feeling a little bit unwell after that game against Iran. He says he's now feeling much better. And some good news in defence, because Kyle Walker is fit, technically fit. He's been recovering from a groin injury. He's not match fit, he hasn't played any matches, but he is technically fit for that game against the USA, who are one of the youngest sides in the competition. They're very quick, they're very pacey. Kyle Walker has pace, so you want him in your defence potentially. So there's a decision to make there for Gareth Southgate. Wales, of course, taking on Iran. Their game will be at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, 1 o'clock local time, so right in the heat of the daytime. England this time, they get a respite from that heat. They're playing at 10 o'clock in the evening, so much cooler. Expect a much pacier game than we had against Iran. Today, at the moment, Uruguay are currently goalless with South Korea. Earlier, Switzerland beat Cameroon 1-0. The goal scorer for Switzerland, by the way, not celebrating because he's got Cameroonian heritage. And then later on, Portugal take on Ghana. That's going to be an interesting one, a rematch of the 2014 group phase where Portugal won 2-1. All eyes, as ever, on Cristiano Ronaldo in that one. Ghana, the lowest ranked side in the competition, but still should pose some of a challenge for Portugal. And then later on this evening, Brazil. We don't need to talk about Brazil. We all know how good they are. We all know they're the favourites, taking on Serbia. This is what some Brazil fans had to tell us earlier.
I think the result against Argentina and Saudi Arabia was something unusual, but Brazil has a really good team, and I don't think we're going to lose to Serbia.
Yeah. No worries at all, no concerns, nothing.
Oh, well, we always have concerns, not really 100% guaranteed, but, well, we're one of the favorites, so we have to be, like, happy to be one of the favorites and cheer for our team.
So the Brazil fans are feeling confident at the moment, although they are being a little bit more cautious given those results with Saudi Arabia beating Argentina and, of course, Japan turning over the Germans.
Yeah, and that's been great for the World Cup in that, you know, it's attracted more interest perhaps. And then, of course, 7 goals, I think, for Spain. And you've been honing your own goal-kicking sort of skills with the, I think it was the kilometres per hour that we saw in that souk area. Have you actually managed to achieve a certain number yet?
Well, yeah, it's going on just around the corner from us. It's kind of like, you know those machines you get in the fairs, just for those who weren't watching in the last hour, where you punch and you have to hit it as hard as you can. They've got one where you have to strike the ball as hard as you can. And you were saying, Mark, go and have a go. So I had a go, and this is how I got on.
Was that a miss?
It was a little bit, and it was slightly off. I'll tell you what, our cameraman Toby, though, he absolutely smashed it, 125 kilometres an hour, and everyone was shouting, and some people were shouting out Roberto Carlos, which I thought was going a little bit over the top, but he did do very well.
Yeah, OK. Well, we'll draw a veil over that and let you get back in the practice pitch and maybe have another go a bit later. But, Paul, for the moment, thank you. And, of course, big day tomorrow, as you say, all the latest from you there. Thanks very much indeed. Dear, oh dear, letting the side down. Now, we were just telling you that Prince Charles has confirmed the royal family heading to Sandringham for Christmas. The King will be there as tradition has had it. Of course, the Queen for 2 years, though, had headed to Windsor during lockdown for Christmas. Well, Windsor Castle has just transformed the state apartments already for Christmas this year, with a 20-feet-high Nordman fir tree standing at the end of St George's Hall. Our national reporter Rosie Wright has been to the castle to have a look for us.
Well, welcome into St George's Hall at Windsor Castle, normally home to state banquets. And for the next few weeks, this absolutely fantastic 20-foot Christmas tree. The decorations are up. Let's speak to one of the curators of the displays. Sally, thank you very much for having us. Talk us through this display and the pressure to put up decorations in a royal residence.
Absolutely. Well, we have 2 closed days a week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So it's 48 hours of intense activity. It took 13 people both days to install and decorate the tree with thousands of sparkling lights, and this year we've gone for a purple theme, so the satin and velvet ribbon mingled amongst the decorations.
There must be quite a lot of logistics to get a 20-foot tree inside here.
We're very lucky that the tree is very local. It comes from the Great Park just outside and brought here by Great Park staff, so that's fantastic help.
Let's go through to the Waterloo Chamber if we can, and of course 30 years ago, this month, these parts of the castle were damaged so badly by the fire, now of course restored to absolute splendour, and partly because of that fire, it's now possible for the public to come and visit.
Absolutely. So 30 years ago, destruction, 25 years ago, the restoration was completed and people could see these fantastic rooms. Of course, amazing contemporary craftsmanship was called on to restore them in their historic design, including the ceilings here and in the room we were just in a moment ago.
So what would happen now in the Waterloo Chamber?
So some people might recognise it from investitures. It's also often used for smaller banquets, although still quite a large room, and receptions.
And can you just show me some of this Christmas display? So every year this changes, and what's the vision?
So the vision this year was to use this slightly dulled gold, which actually works really well in this wood-panelled room. We have works made of gilt bronze, purchased by George IV, and some examples of porcelain, which was a wedding gift to Queen Alexandra.
Sally, thank you very much. Does your display at home look anything like
It's not quite as large.
Well, open to the public later on today. Windsor Castle, if you want to take a look yourself at a glimpse of how the royals do Christmas decorations.
Rosie, thank you very much. Not a cracker to be seen, it seems. Coming up in this next hour, talking about Christmas, we're also Black Friday tomorrow, of course. Will you be spending? If so, we'll be giving you some advice coming up. Before that, let's get an update on the weather.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir with your latest weather update. For the next few hours, that weather front clears towards the east with blustery showers to follow. There are wind and rain warnings in force until 7 p.m. across Wales and southern England. But the front does clear, but that low pressure system delivering showers and also gales further west. But it will drift towards the north. All change through Friday, quieter conditions, and then yet again more rain for the weekend. So this heavy rain across the east will clear around mid-evening, but notice a rash of showers further west and also strong winds. So a lively evening to come across Wales, Western Scotland, Northern Ireland. Those showers tend to ease across England and Wales, but further showers likely into the early hours of Friday morning across the north as well as the west of Scotland. 1 or 2 clipping Northern Ireland. A chilly start to the day on Friday, but it will be bright. Through the morning then, a few showers tracking across England and Wales, but they'll be few and far between. Some drier weather, but showers continue and they'll be heavy across central and northern areas of Scotland. 1 or 2 just creeping in across Northern Ireland. So a keen breeze up here. Further south, a lighter breeze as temperatures rise around 12-13 degrees Celsius. And that pretty much sets the scene for the weekend. Chilly mornings, but some milder air through the day. So through Friday evening, we watch as these showers tend to just come and go across the western part of Scotland. Elsewhere, it's a dry evening, a cold night, even with a touch of frost and some mist and fog patches to start the day on Saturday. But this rain is approaching from the west. The winds are picking up some strength through Saturday morning, and eventually most places will see that rain through Saturday and into Sunday, where it could stall across the southeast. Elsewhere, showers will follow. So all in all, through the next few days, yes, after a bit of a chilly start on Saturday morning, the rain will arrive across the west. Watch out for it being heavy with gales towards the northwest. And here's your outlook into the first part of next week. Things slowly settle down from the south and it will turn cooler as well.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
And welcome back to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. And coming up this hour, The amount energy companies can charge for electricity and gas set to increase yet again from January, but households could be protected from that increase. We'll hear from the energy experts as to what's coming up. Plus, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab facing yet more investigations into alleged bullying. Our political correspondent has the latest for us at Westminster. And heading to Doha in Qatar, England's fans anticipating the match against the US tomorrow for what could be their second win in the World Cup after that 6-2 victory over Iran. All that to come, and don't forget, get in touch with us as ever, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and tell us about your thoughts on all the issues of the day. Let's get the latest headlines now with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 2, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of migrants reaching the UK has hit its highest level since the Second World War. The data from the Office for National Statistics shows 504,000 more people moved to the UK than left in the year to June. It beats the previous highest record of 390,000 in 2015. The ONS says the sharp rise has been driven by unprecedented events, including the war in Ukraine and the end of COVID restrictions. Downing Street says the Prime Minister's committed to bringing overall numbers down. Border control expert Henry Bolton told GB News there's an additional strain on local communities with no increase in services to match.
We've got MPs from across the country, and it's sort of beyond one party here, saying, look, what is happening here? Our local areas are being now flooded with people, our hotels are being taken over, we have no idea how long this is going to go on, and no idea what you're going to do about it. There is no plan, and that's the problem.
Well, immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson says the figures are a reflection of the domestic labour shortage.
We issue about 1 million visas a year. Now, the bulk of those will be people coming to work here under the skilled worker visa route and students. And there's been an increase of some 71% of those two categories since the pandemic. But that's a reflection on the shortage of labour in the UK. We need people to fill the jobs. We're not doing that with the resident labour market.
120 people have been arrested in the UK's biggest ever fraud sting. The global operation brought down a website which helped criminals scam thousands of victims out of millions of pounds. The site generated a spoof phone number which made it look as if calls were being made from banks, tax offices and other official bodies. Around 70,000 potential victims will now be sent a text message asking them to contact police. The RMT has asked the government for help in resolving its dispute with train companies. The union's General Secretary Mick Lynch has been holding talks with the Transport Secretary after announcing a fresh round of strikes over the festive period. He described the meeting with Mark Harper as positive, but he hasn't ruled out further industrial action. He wants the government to act as a facilitator, setting out in writing what authority the train operators have.
We've got a dispute here with employers who are not allowed to negotiate. He's got to clarify that in writing to us and perhaps to them, and that's his role. He is the facilitator, as he's now calling himself. So he's got to show us what that actually means, some mechanics of how this is going to progress and some timelines of how we're going to progress the discussions.
While Transport Secretary Mark Harper says changes need to be made before pay can be negotiated.
If there is agreement on the reform that's needed in the rail industry to make it more flexible and to take cost out of it, that is what frees up the resources to enable the employers, Network Rail and the train operating companies, to then make an improved pay offer to the trade unions. Now that detailed work is work they need to do.
Teachers across Scotland are staging their first national strike in almost 40 years. Thousands of staff are demonstrating, calling for a 10% pay rise. Members of the Educational Institute of Scotland are warning of more industrial action if their demands aren't met.
Good morning, support your striking staff. Good morning.
Meanwhile, around 70,000 university and college union members have launched a 2-day strike and plan to walk out again on November the 30th. The union says lecturers and other academic staff has suffered a decade of below-inflation pay rises. Postal workers are also striking today. The Communication Workers Union claims Royal Mail is trying to spin people into thinking it's modernising the service. It's calling for the government to intervene, saying the Postal chief executive has made negotiations difficult and should be sacked. Ofgem has raised the energy price cap, which will come into force from the 1st of January. Without government support, the average household bill would hit over £4,200 a year. But the energy price guarantee means customers will pay £2,500 until April. Support has been promised for 18 months. Consultancy firm Cornwall Insight says it means the government could end up paying around £42 billion. And flood warnings have been issued and transport delays are expected as strong winds and heavy rain hit the UK. The Met Office has put out a yellow wind warning for Wales from 7 p.m. until midnight. Similar alerts are currently in place across southern and northwest England. Winds could reach up to 65 miles per hour, especially on the coast, with some areas at risk of power cuts. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark.
Rhiannon, thanks very much indeed. So, the General Secretary of the RMT, Mick Lynch, has said in this past hour that his meeting with the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, had been positive, but adding that he wanted assurances in writing. Well, those comments came after his union had announced earlier this week they'll be holding 48-hour strikes in the run-up to Christmas and the New Year. Let's get more with our political reporter, Catherine Forster, who's outside the Department of Transport and spoke to Mr Lynch when he came out. It is slightly different mood music, indicating that they're going to be going in terms of discussions on how the rail operating companies, the 14 companies, negotiate with the RMT.
Yes, it is. They both use the word positive, which is obviously hopeful. Mick Lynch said that it was a positive discussion. Mark Harper said exactly the same. Mark Harper also said that it was constructive. Mick Lynch wants the government to act as a facilitator between the unions and the employers and has asked for the Transport Secretary to write a letter to him outlining the next steps, and he stressed to the Transport Secretary that the Transport Secretary had, as he said, a legal responsibility for industrial relations and to set the mandate for employers. He said that the employers had basically been trying to negotiate with their hands half tied behind their backs. Now, Mark Harper has been speaking subsequently, and he has emphasised that before they will negotiate on pay, they have to negotiate on reform. The government is saying that they've put huge amounts of money into the rail, supporting the rail industry during the pandemic, and levels of rail use are still down considerably, and that reforms to ways of working are long overdue. Now, the unions do not like that and are quite resistant to it. But Mark Harper's reasoning is that if we can settle on some reforms, that will free up resources to make a better pay offer. So a way to go, but at least they are talking, and certainly a step forward, I would say, from relations in the summer between the government and the rail unions, because Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, then wouldn't even engage directly in talks with them. So hopeful noises, but let's hope something will come of this, but let's see.
And separately, the RMT is talking to Network Rail in the morning because, of course, we've got the signalling staff as well as part of this dispute. But he did paint this extraordinary picture of the rail delivery group, as it's called, the 14 different rail companies, where the RMT says it went in to try to talk to them and they said that they had no mandate to negotiate. I mean, it does seem an extraordinary mix-up.
It's really quite opaque, isn't it? Everybody is giving a rather different version of events. I mean, Mick Lynch was saying only a day or so ago that this was the government's fault. Everybody, the government also obviously thinks that the unions are being unreasonable. But interestingly, Mick Lynch was asked, what consumers should do, what the travelling public should do if they were planning to travel over the Christmas period, what they should do. And Mick Lynch said, write to your Conservative MP and ask them to get involved. So he is very firmly putting responsibility at the government's door.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, of course, the strikes at the moment still in place. Catherine at the Department of Transport, thanks very much indeed for that. Now, let's talk about energy. The Ofgem energy price cap announced today that the regulator is saying it will reach the equivalent of £4,279 a year for the average household from January. However, let's remember that the government's support in place ensuring average households paying £2,500. However, the extra cost to the government could double in the new year, up to £5 billion a month because of that hike. To dissect the numbers further, our economics and business editor Liam Halligan joining us with On the Money. Now, before people start panicking, this is not 4,279. They're going to have to find. The cap is there, but the energy price help from the government is also still in place.
That's right. This is really a kind of a hypothetical statement, and it doesn't affect GB News viewers and listeners directly because that energy price cap is there and it will stay there until April. The government confirmed that in the autumn statement last week, keeping the average energy bill, this is dual fuel, gas and electricity, at £2,500 a year mark. What Ofgem, the energy regulator, is saying is if that price cap from the government wasn't in place, the amount that they'd have to charge on average would be over £4,000 because wholesale gas and electricity prices are still relatively high, not least as a result of the war in Ukraine. So what we learned from today's announcement is the extent to which the government is subsidising between about just over £4,000 and £2,500 for the average household per year. That's the amount of government subsidy. That subsidy will be there until April, and then after April, the subsidy will still be there, but will be slightly less generous and may start to be targeted. At the moment, it's for everyone. After April 2023, it may start to be targeted more on more vulnerable households.
And the cap as well going up to, I think it was 3,000 from 2,500.
Potentially,
the average
that's an estimated number. They haven't actually confirmed that number.
But as you've discussed with us before, this is all dependent on wholesale prices out there in the market. Now, where are we? Of course, we're going into the colder weather. We've seen all these problems in Ukraine with its energy market out there. I mean, are we still going to see a price hike as we head deeper into winter?
Now, I've been watching a lot of the coverage from other media outlets on this today, and I just wanted to say, because I haven't really heard anyone else say it, since the summer and September, when we were talking about the energy price cap, then Prime Minister Liz Truss announced it. Remember, she was in the middle of announcing this energy price cap, and then news spread of the unfortunate situation Her Majesty's...
and the notes being handed around in the Commons when it happened.
So we never sort of got to the end of that statement. But at that time, wholesale energy prices were absolutely sky high. Over the summer, the price of what we call a megawatt hour of gas on European markets hit €350 mark, which is absolutely huge. We're now nearer €100 per megawatt hour. So that was a spike. It's come down a lot. Now, €100 per megawatt hour, it's still quite high by historic standards, but it's much, much lower than it was when we first started talking about these energy price caps. And I just wanted to say, yes, the energy price cap will cost a lot of money. It will cost around £5 billion a month between now and April. Then, depending on where it's set from April, it will cost serious money. And £5 billion, it's like a penny on income tax for a whole year. It's a lot of money. But I wanted to say that it's not nearly as expensive as a lot of people thought it would be when the energy price cap was first announced under Prime Minister Truss, because back then wholesale prices were much, much higher.
Another thing I want to ask you is, I mean, a lot of people are on oil in rural areas for their heating, and there's been a little bit of help announced for them, but only a couple of £100. But the other aspect is forecourt prices. Now, the pound has strengthened against the dollar
about $1.20 now.
Does that mean that we will be seeing some prices coming down at the forecourt? Because obviously it's all priced in dollars on the international market.
We hope so. So a lot of the reason the pound has strengthened against the dollar is actually because the dollar has weakened, because there's now a sense, and this is kind of good news vicariously for us, that the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, which is by far and away the most important central bank in the world, it kind of sets the tone for where interest rates are going. They have been raising interest rates like Billio, 75 basis points, 75. They've done it 4 times in a row. Hard and fast. The Americans, they do not mess about. There's inflation. We're going to strangle it, and we're going to really push down within. Once the Federal Reserve got going, it's really been very, very demonstrative. There's a sense now that they might have got to the end of those big rate hikes, and the next rate hikes in America, they're still going to go up a bit.
But a bit
might be a
softer.
bit less, so people put less money in the dollar to benefit from those interest rate hikes, and so that makes the pound look a bit better. But you're right, with the pound at $1.20 rather than $1.11, 12, where it's been recently, oil imports should be cheaper, so we should get cheaper petrol and diesel on the forecourt. Mark, as we've said in the past, when oil prices go up, petrol prices, they go up like a rocket,
down like
a feather. The oil and gas companies and a lot of the petrol retailers, not the independent petrol retailers who have very small margins, but the national petrol retailers, they will not lower prices quickly. It will be down to journalists, motorist groups, protesters like Howard Cox, we've often had him on, haven't we, from Fair Fuel UK, saying, you've got to get these prices down, politicians will get involved.
And of course,
at least the oil price is coming down a bit. And I would say more generally, I'm starting to see on financial markets just chinks of light, like I said about the dollar, just chinks of light that the worst of the inflation may be behind us now. I'm not saying that's definite, because producer prices are still high, 19% producer price
Which is going to hit manufacturers.
That feeds through. But there is a sense that maybe inflation, certainly in 2023, will be significantly less than this year, and that's good news.
And we'll be hearing that good news first here on GB News, we hope. Liam, forever, thank you on that. Talking about spending, it's Black Friday tomorrow. Are you going to be splashing the cash? We've got a warning for you if you are. That's coming up in a moment. First, a look at the weather.
Hello there. For the rest of today, strong gusts, heavy rain tracking eastwards with blustery showers to follow and a lively evening, particularly towards the west. So let's have a look at the bigger picture. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure with this cold front, which is rather pokey. Some heavy bursts likely through the day as it tracks from the west towards the east. So you can see these brighter echoes representing that heavy rain moving towards the central spine of the country. By the evening, it'll be across eastern Scotland, eastern England, down towards the southeast. And then the winds pick up again further west. So there are wind and rain warnings in force throughout the day across Wales, as well as central southern parts of England down towards the West Country. So through this evening, yes, a very windy one to come associated with that rain band. That rain band does clear though, but showers move in, particularly across Irish sea coast, western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, gusts up to 50, 60 miles an hour for a time, and also gales. But then things tend to quieten down across England and Wales, a few showers lurking, and always showery across central and northern western parts of Scotland as we enter Friday. It will be a chilly start to the day as well, with some sunshine coming through once the sun rises. But you can see here towards the northwest, showery bursts of rain throughout, and also that strong wind. There will be a few showers further south and west, particularly across South Wales and the West Country, but brighter skies, breezy, but some sunshine coming through as temperatures rise after a cold start to around 10, 11, 12 degrees Celsius. So that's Friday. Into Friday night, many areas becoming dry, fewer showers across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland seeing 1 or 2, and that leads into a cold start to Saturday. We're likely to see some mist and fog patches to start the day. Isolated frost also, and then more rain arrives, and that rain sweeps across the country, stores across the southeast as we head through to Sunday, and still breezy.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now, if you're planning to snag some Black Friday deals tomorrow, you might want to think again because, yes, there is a snag. New research suggesting deals are riddled with fakes and scams. According to Price Runner, retailers predict a fall in total spending this year. Survey revealing that 55% of us say they won't even bother to head to the high street this week. But with a struggling of ongoing fall in footfall, as it's said, over shops since COVID, a burst in sales is just what they perhaps need. Let's speak now to consumer expert Evelina Gali joining us. Evelina, thank you very much indeed. I mean, more and more people, of course, are going online rather than going into shops. And I gather that's where other problems can come up about fake goods or even unsafe goods.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. Online is where Black Friday is happening this year, according to most Brits at least. And they are very much affected by the cost of living crisis, and trying to buy more products on discount is one of the ways they are trying to keep costs down. So actually, according to our research, 1 in 3 Brits will take part of the Black Friday sale this year.
And electronic goods are normally the thing that people go for on Black Friday, the big ticket items. And is that really where we can lend or end up in trouble with things that aren't safe to plug into our mains, for instance?
That's actually a great point you're taking, because you need to make your research and really look at the small figures, like look at the article number of a product you're buying, because especially in the UK, obviously the outlets are different than other places, but also a product that's not made for your market might not function as you want it to be in your market as well, like phones, for instance.
OK, yes, because obviously there are different areas for different SIM cards and so on. But what about the fact that there's a lot of scam stuff up there, particularly coming out of China, for instance, that they aren't perhaps up to European standards in quality?
Yes, so there are a lot of different scams out there. Actually, according to our research, about 1 in 3 Brits have been scammed online. Usually they don't even get the product they ordered. So it is very important to make your research and buy from a retailer that you trust. Also, there are other ways to sort of make a sale look even better than it actually is. So what we see is that quite a lot of shops increase the price during the months sort of leading up to Black Friday. And then just the week before Black Friday, they lower the price again to make the price drop look even bigger than it actually is.
So you think you're getting a saving, but you're not. You're just paying basically what the old price was.
Exactly. What we can see last year, 1 in 5 deals was what we would categorize as a fake deal, actually.
Right. Now, this was an American thing, Black Friday. Of course, after Thanksgiving, everyone would go to the shops to spend. I mean, should it be that we return to our old traditional way of going to the January sales, where we actually go into a shop and we can see what we're buying physically?
Actually, if you look at the average price across many segments, November is the cheapest month. So Black Friday, even though there are some scams out there and you need to do your research, there are some great findings as well.
OK, and have you actually identified any bargains? What should we be looking for this year? Is there something that is worth buying?
Of course I have. I have all the stats for you. So, for instance, video games are a great opportunity right now to get those on a discount right now, especially if you maybe have not the latest generation, but the generation before. So the old PlayStation or the old Xbox, you can get some great deals there right now. Also, electric toothbrushes are on quite a lot of sale compared to the price this summer.
OK, so I'll smile nicely at that fact. Thank you very much indeed, and I look forward to getting something for my PlayStation 2. Thank you very much, Evelina, and we'll see what bargains emerge tomorrow. I'm not joking on that. I have got a PlayStation 2, or at least my son has. Now, university lecturers and teachers go on strike today. Industrial unrest continuing to spread across the country in their various disputes over paid jobs and conditions. Our reporter Theo Chikomba has more for us.
Today belongs to the union. Today belongs to the members. I am UCU and proud, and I really hope you are too.
This was the moment tens of thousands of lecturers had been waiting for. A nationwide strike set to be the biggest ever to hit UK universities as they walk out over pay and conditions.
People are realising that they won't be able to afford to pay their bills, and that's a situation that affects students as much as lecturers. We're seeing that the staff at universities, a lot of whom are casualised on very short contracts, effectively 0 hours in some cases, are struggling a great deal, as are many contracted members of staff, and students are also struggling. We're seeing that as lecturers or as people working in professional services.
From today, over 70,000 staff from 150 universities will strike over 3 days, potentially halting the studies of more than 2.5 million students. But what's the mood on campus?
When the staff get paid more, the students get a better degree, because obviously when you're learning in a learning environment, if the person teaching you is in like kind of like a horrible situation, they're not getting paid enough, they're working crazy hours without enough pay, they're getting the pensions cut, it's just the entire like environment's just not like what a university should be. So I mean, the kind of like outcome for students, I think from my perspective anyway, should be that we want staff to be on proper contracts and paid more.
Another concern is pensions. Universities UK, which represents 140 institutions, say pension contributions were already at the very limit of affordability and argue a period of stability in the economy is needed.
The view that we have is that we need to see how fragile the current surplus situation is. Things are fairly strange financially at the moment, but if that was to be something that continued, we would want to know what we could do to improve the pension scheme. It's not an unreasonable question from the union, and we're working very hard with them to try and see what can be done.
Campuses across the country will be eerily quiet today as staff head to the picket lines in what the UCU describes as a strike to defend their jobs and take back their pensions. Theo Chikomba, GB News.
Well, let's just update you that apparently a latest strike in this winter of discontent is that workers with Green King, the brewery, have voted to strike. They'll be walking out for 5 days from December the 5th, which will halt deliveries to pubs and many restaurants, including KFC, Burger King and Pizza Hut. Is it a winter of discontent? Well, you've got plenty of reaction coming in with your views. Mark has written to us to say clearly various sectors are determined to bring the current government down. Question mark. Rail, civil servants, lecturers, Royal Mail, etc. The list goes on. And now brewery workers as well, it seems. Michael saying, all these strikers and trade unions claiming poverty and low pay as their motivation seem willing and able to lose thousands of pounds in wages every time they go on strike. An odd contradiction, I would suggest. And then regarding the migrant issue, Robert says, if civil servants could process 200,000 visas for Ukrainian people in less than 10 months, why can't they process more than 4 people a week of those illegal migrants? Of course, that's to do with the claims for asylum. You're watching GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Coming up, heading to Scotland, another strike. The teachers on strike there in their dispute over pay. First, let's get an update on the news headlines with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. It's just gone 2:30. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of migrants reaching the UK has hit its highest level since the Second World War. The data from the Office for National Statistics shows 504,000 more people moved to the UK than left in the year to June. It beats the previous record of 390,000 in 2015. The ONS says the sharp rise has been driven by unprecedented events, including the war in Ukraine and the end of COVID restrictions. Downing Street says the Prime Minister is committed to bringing overall numbers down. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the government's decision-making has collapsed.
Today's figures show is that the Conservatives have completely mismanaged both the asylum and the immigration systems. So you've got 98% of small boat cases still haven't been decided, and at the same time there's been an 80% increase in work visas because the government is failing to tackle the skills shortages and some of the labour shortages in the economy.
120 people have been arrested in the UK's biggest ever fraud sting. The global operation brought down a website which helped criminals scam thousands of victims out of millions of pounds. The site generated a spoof phone number which made it look as if calls were being made from banks, tax offices and other official bodies. Around 70,000 potential victims will now be sent a text message asking them to contact police. The RMT has asked the government for help in resolving its dispute with train companies. The union's General Secretary Mick Lynch has been holding talks with the Transport Secretary after announcing a fresh round of strikes over the festive period. He described the meeting with Mark Harper as positive and says he's now seeking reassurance in writing. Teachers across Scotland are staging their first national strike in almost 40 years. Thousands of staff are demonstrating, calling for a 10% pay rise. Members of the Educational Institute of Scotland are warning of more industrial action if their demands aren't met. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere, Mark. We'll be back in just a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now, as we're hearing in the headlines with Rhiannon in Scotland today, nearly all children in nurseries and schools are having to stay at home. It's the first national school strike since the 1980s there, a one-day walkout with teachers demanding a 10% pay rise. A new pay offer from the employer, Costler, ordered rises of 6.85%, but rejected by the unions as insulting. The Educational Institute of Scotland, representing about 80% of the country's teachers, its industrial action closing almost all primary, secondary and additional support needs schools. Let's speak now to a parent, Leanne Maguire, who's also chair at the Glasgow City Parents Group. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Leanne. I guess that the immediate problem is all of you having to find childcare for all the kids.
Yeah, so there's a variety of issues that today brings. If you're a single parent and you don't have that support network around you that you can quickly call in, like babysitting duties, or if you have a child with additional support needs, it's very difficult sometimes for those children to understand what's going on today and why they're not in school, not seeing their friends.
And I guess the other problem is that with lockdown, many kids missed much schooling as well. So this is another top-up, if you like, on that problem.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, obviously, you could see it as just being one day, but if COSLA and Scottish Government and the EIS don't come to an agreement soon, then this one day could result in future strikes, which is quite concerning.
Do you have any sympathy with the teachers, particularly on what they're looking for, which is an inflation rate paid deal, 10%?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, most parents understand why today's happening, whilst they might have frustrations about trying to make alternative arrangements, trying to juggle their work or trying to juggle other caring responsibilities. I think we understand what's happening here. The main frustration is at Scottish Government and COSLA, and the fact that they've let it get so close to the wire and a decision still hasn't been made or an offer hasn't been accepted. And it's that threat then of future industrial action coming down the line.
I mean, are there some parents in your group there who may think 6.85% actually it's not a bad offer?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like any parents that maybe they're looking at their own wage at the moment, they don't have the luxury to strike if they're not happy. Yeah, you're going to have both sides of the argument. But I think because teachers' jobs have changed so much, and I think as parents, we have developed a wee bit of a better understanding of teachers' roles. But during COVID, when we were all trying to homeschool and we were all driven insane by it, I think the overall thought is that they understand why, but I mean, it's worrying and it's frustrating and it really knocks out the routine that they're used to.
Yeah. Can I ask you what your home learning has been about today, apart from obviously how to do a television interview?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate. My daughter's 15, so even if I was working in the office, she's quite self-sufficient. So she's actually going away for the day with her orchestra to help plan their Christmas concert. So she's got plenty of options to keep her busy.
And what are they performing?
So she plays the double bass, so I don't know the actual tunes that they're playing, but yeah, that's what the planning is for today. So I'm sure she'd much rather be doing that than studying for prelims coming up.
Extra rehearsal time, always needed, of course. Leanne, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we wish your daughter and the rest of the orchestra well. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, from Scotland back down to Devon, where a local authority is launching legal action against the government over the use of hotels to house asylum seekers. Torbay Council says that plans to hand over a third hotel to migrants in Torquay would result in increased pressure on services. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has been there to find out more.
Calm seas off Torquay witnessed the international regatta. And whether it's red sails in the sunset or white sails at noon, it's always a charming picture.
The English Riviera has been the jewel in England's crown for years, entertaining holidaymakers from across the world. But there's a storm brewing. In recent weeks, 2 of Torquay's best-loved hotels have been requisitioned by the Home Office to house migrants fresh from the processing centre in Manston. Torbay Council thought that was it. They didn't expect a third hotel to be taken out of action. Torbay Council says it had a legitimate expectation that no other hotels in the area would be used. It also says that the Home Office hasn't taken into consideration the fact that this is a core tourism area. And they're also extremely concerned about the impact on children's services. The Esplanade Hotel in Paignton already houses migrants at a cost of £1.5 million a year. Of the 100 migrants that are said to be staying at the Esplanade Hotel here in Paignton, 20 of them have said that they're under the age of 18. And that creates another problem. It means that Torbay Council's Children's Services Department needs to get involved. Every person under the age of 18 on Torbay Council's radar requires monitoring, helping, safeguarding, and that costs. So when moves were made to turn a third hotel into an asylum seekers hostel, the council issued a pre-proceedings letter to the Home Office through their solicitors, demanding the third hotel should not be brought into operation. And just this week, the Home Office granted a stay of execution. Good news for the caretakers of the Maycliffe Hotel, who'd been told to pack their bags.
We just needed that extra time more than anything, just so we could find something suitable.
In a statement, the Home Office said, while we accept that hotels do not provide a long-term solution, they do offer safe, secure and clean accommodation, and we're working hard with local authorities to find appropriate accommodation during this challenging time. But safe for who? Roxanne and Miles had been told they had to leave before the migrants arrived because it wouldn't be safe for their children. They're concerned now for the elderly residents who live on the road.
Everybody needs to be bear in mind, you know, they have a duty of responsibility not only to the new people arriving in the country, but also to the people and the residents of the local area here already.
The halting of the plans is welcome news in Torquay, but no one knows how long the hiatus will last, if at all. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, let's stay with the issue of the migrants and immigration overall. The Home Office now confirming that net migration has hit more than 500,000 people in the past year, an estimated 504,000 coming into the UK than leaving in 2021, the highest amount since the Second World War. The previous record, 390,000, set back in 2015, which of course was before Brexit. Well, joining us now to discuss the issue, our own Home and Security Editor, Mark White. And Mark, we've seen the situation there in Torbay on the hotels. You saw that in Blackpool, of course, similarly. But this figure that's coming out now is the overall picture, not just on those who are in hotel accommodation. And they're looking at those who come in from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Hong Kong. It's a big picture.
Yeah, those that have come over as part of the resettlement schemes to help those out in Ukraine and Hong Kong and, of course, in Afghanistan do make up a significant proportion of the uplift here. But also, we're looking at a very significant increase in the number of student visas that have been issued. Now, this was taken over a 24-month period because of the COVID lockdown, when not that many came across. And compared to 2019, pre-COVID levels, there's been a 77% increase in student visas, been driven by a lot of visa applications from India and from Nigeria.
But the irony is that the figures are coming out after we left the EU, because the concern was about the free movement of people, and particularly perhaps East European workers coming here and taking jobs, as people said. This now is indicating that perhaps there is a unique set of factors once we're outside the EU.
Yes, that's right. The sort of the visa schemes that they have now, only 11% of those who are applying for work visas in the UK are from the European Union. The vast majority of people are coming from outside the European Union. But the issue, of course, for those who are concerned about overall migration numbers is the fact that you've got 500,000 people coming into the country compared to those that are going out of the country.
And local authorities have to look after those in many cases in terms of providing social, housing, even health and so on. It's an extra pressure on services. And it's also for the government very difficult, because we had Suella Braverman in the Home Office committee yesterday saying that she acknowledged the UK had lost control of borders. She'd be looking at this figure of 100,000 for net migration. We've not heard the figures.
She'll be lucky.
Exactly. And the government really trying to balance figures when 500,000 is way outside the ballpark.
Yeah, that 100,000 figure is really taking Suella Braverman back to the claims that David Cameron made when he became Prime Minister, when he said he wanted to get net migration down to the tens of thousands, so below 100,000. That's just way off it, not even in sight at the moment. But we know that Suella Braverman wants to bring net migration down. She clashed, we're told, with the Liz Truss government because they wanted to push an expansion of migration to help boost the economy. Quite what Rishi Sunak wants to do in terms of overall migration numbers, not exactly clear.
And again, we are discussing what's happening about illegal migration in terms of the boats coming across. Albanian, as you've been reporting, gangs, people smugglers suggested of being operating that. I mean, net figures in terms of migration, this particular 72,000 for asylum seekers. But there's a little bit more detail coming through about this issue of the Albanian numbers coming through.
Yeah, that's right. So 42,000 people have arrived in small boats so far this year. Many of those, the vast majority of those, go on to claim asylum. Overall asylum claims for the past year are 72,000. We're told that 13,000 asylum applications are from Albanians, with about half that number having come across on small boats. And interestingly, in terms of the success of asylum applications, well, more than 70% of those who claim asylum are granted asylum at some point. However, when you look at Albanians and then whittle it down further to Albanian men...
Right, single men. Yeah.
90% of those are not granted asylum. Okay. Only 10% are, which begs the question, if that's the case, why are they not on the next flight off to Tirana? Well, the reason is that a number of those claiming asylum go on to claim that they are victims of trafficking, human and modern slavery. And of course that then...
So that's another process
starts
that's got to be
a
gone
tandem
through, right.
process to asylum, in which case, there is a lower threshold for proof that you have been a victim of trafficking. And further down the road, in many cases, they're granted leave to remain in the country.
Right, OK. And obviously you'll be reporting on that as we get the latest...
One note of encouragement, actually, on the Albanian asylum, or not asylum seekers, but Albanians coming across on the small boats. The Home Office confirming that they've seen proportionally that number dropping. They are the dominant group coming across, but the numbers are decreasing, we're told, in recent weeks.
And, the weather's getting worse as well for the winter. So thank you very much, Mark, for updating us on that very complex picture. Let's update you now on the situation with the World Cup. Seems the goals are drying up a little bit. Switzerland beating Cameroon 1-0. Currently 0-0 between Uruguay and South Korea. But stoppage time, of course, brings lots of shocks in the tournament. And not long to go till England's second group game against the USA tomorrow, kicking off at 7. And it looks as if Harry Kane is fit. Is Paul Hawkins fit? Can he indeed put the ball in the back of the net? Let's ask him.
Just about fit, Mark. Welcome to Doha, where the sun's gone down now. We're in a kind of area that's been set up to celebrate South American football. So all the things you can see around us are basically in homage to South American football. This enormous statue of the Copa Libertadores just next to us, and all the people who've won it on here, all the clubs in South America, and then lots of people walking around in various some club football shirts from South America, but over here I think we've got Ecuador, a couple of guys in Ecuador shirts there, lots of people in Brazil shirts and Argentina shirts, Brazil of course later playing Serbia. But yeah, as you say, Harry Kane is fit for England to face the USA tomorrow, which is great news for England. They don't really have any injury concerns. The only dilemma for boss Gareth Southgate is whether he plays Kyle Walker, who's not match fit. He's been on a long-term recovery from a groin injury, but he's not match fit himself. Other press conferences today from the Welsh FA. We're just hearing Rob Page, by the way, speaking about midfielder Joe Allen's fitness. He is fit and raring to go. That is a big plus for Wales to have Joe Allen fit. So whether he plays him or not, again, like Kyle Walker, he's not match fit, but he is fit in terms of being passed by the physios to play. So whether he features against Iran or not tomorrow will be an interesting one for the Wales manager, Rob Page. Right now, as you say, Uruguay and South Korea currently goalless and vying for most boring match of the World Cup. Possibly ever. Earlier on, the Swiss beat Cameroon 1-0. Later on, we're hoping for more goals and, frankly, a better quality of football when Portugal take on Ghana, a rematch of the 2014 group stage, and then later on, Brazil against Serbia. This is what the Brazil fans have been saying to us. What's the first song you're going to sing tonight?
The first song?
Yeah.
First song is going to be our anthem, right? Yeah.
And then after that, top Brazil song that the fans sing?
The fans sing?
Yeah.
There is a lot, huh?
I need to hear it.
Okay, we can sing for you.
Go on.
Okay, so... oh, 58 foi Pelé, em 62 foi o Mané, em 70 o Esquadrão, primeiro a ser tricampeão.
And what does that mean?
It's the 58 was Pelé, and 62 was Mané. Mané Garrincha was the best player. And 70, the third cup, was the Squadron. First to be third-time champion. 94, Romario. 2002, Phenomenon. Ronaldo, Phenomenon. First, 4 times champions, the only 5 times champions. Oh, Brasil!
Okay, makes sense. And 2022, who's the hero?
Neymar. Neymar, I believe. Yeah. Cristiano came only for have a tour, right? He doesn't have more a job. He's sad.
He is very sad, yeah, and he's going to have no money. How are you feeling about playing Serbia tonight? Are you worried?
No, not worried. I believe that it's the toughest match on this phase, on the group phase. But we are very confident that we're going to win this.
The first match always is quite nervous, because guys still getting involved with the World Cup. And we are confident, with respect, but confident.
Yeah, tell that to Argentina, right? Argentina, Germany, you saw what happened to them.
Yeah. But they are used to fail on the first game, right? We never failed, but they are used to fail in the first game. So
I'm sad because of Argentina. Yeah, I cannot sleep at night. I was wondering about Messi. Say, oh, come on, Messi never won. Yeah,
Who are the team to fear at the tournament other than Brazil then? Who looks good so far? I know we haven't seen everyone.
Yeah, I think that France is very strong. Spain, England is very strong as well.
You're just saying that.
Yeah. It's right. You're right.
Actually, I believe this is going to be the top 4 that they're going to be in the semi-final.
And the Premier League is very strong, so the players are used to have very strong matches as well for the England team. So you could be one of the greats.
Yeah, the dark horses maybe. I don't know.
Let's see.
We didn't mention Wales there, Paul, which is very disappointing, of course. But you made a very pertinent point, of course, with the shocks with what happened with Saudi Arabia and Japan. His hopes are for Neymar. And we saw what happened with Messi. I mean, there have been lots of shocks, lots of goals too, though they've dried up today, including yours. You missed from the penalty spot.
Yeah, I kind of missed. We've been playing this game that's a little bit like the one you get in the fair, where you have to punch the punch bag really, really hard. You have to strike the ball really hard, and they record how fast you can kick it. Now, I didn't even get to 100 kilometres an hour earlier on today. But just have a look at what Toby, the cameraman, managed to clock. 125 kilometres an hour. I don't know if you're looking at it now.
Santia, well done, bro. Bro.
125 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
And I was going to say he drew quite a crowd. Lots of people shouting Roberto Carlos. So look, there's various things going on here. We've got a little cage here where people can get stuck in and play a little bit of futsal. There you go. And then I've seen some very grown men, by the way, playing inside there, which is very funny given the size of the cage. And then over on the other side, it's that strike the ball as hard as you can. And there's various other things going on. It's great. It's very interactive and it's free for everyone.
And great fun. However, looking forward to tomorrow, Friday, the day of prayer. I know a lot of Welsh fans were getting a bit concerned that I gather there's an alcohol ban in the morning before 12 noon with, of course, the game at 1 o'clock lunchtime kick-off.
Yeah. Some late rule changes. No alcohol until midday. Given the match kicks off at 1 o'clock local time, and you've got to get to the stadium from your hotel. So there's the Intercontinental Hotel has kind of become a bit of a Welsh hub, both pre and post match. That's where fans are gathering, and they get this kind of packages where they get a number of beers and a curry or whatever the food is for a set price. Now the authorities have said no alcohol until midday. Now, given you've got to get from the hotel to the stadium, that stadium where the Welsh are playing, the Ahmed Ben Ali Stadium, about 25 minutes from central Doha, you're not really going to have any time to have any alcohol before the game. So pretty much all the Welsh fans will be watching that game dry, and they're going to have to make up for it when they come out after the game.
Paul, thanks very much indeed for that. We'll let you get back to practice on the kicking, see if you can beat Toby's speed and accuracy as well, we have to say, for the moment. Thanks very much for bringing us the latest there in Doha. Well, that's that as they head off into the net for the moment, but we'll be back, of course, on Monday at 12. Don't go anywhere, though, because Patrick's coming up next to update you with everything, and an update, too, on the weather for you now.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir with your latest weather update. For the next few hours, that weather front clears towards the east with blustery showers to follow. There are wind and rain warnings in force until 7 p.m. across Wales and southern England. But the front does clear, but that low pressure system delivering showers and also gales further west. But it will drift towards the north. All change through Friday, quieter conditions, and then yet again more rain for the weekend. So this heavy rain across the east will clear around mid-evening, but notice a rash of showers further west and also strong winds. So a lively evening to come across Wales, Western Scotland, Northern Ireland. Those showers tend to ease across England and Wales, but further showers likely into the early hours of Friday morning across the north as well as the west of Scotland. 1 or 2 clipping Northern Ireland. A chilly start to the day on Friday, but it will be bright. Through the morning then, a few showers tracking across England and Wales, but they'll be few and far between. Some drier weather, but showers continue and they'll be heavy across central and northern areas of Scotland. 1 or 2 just creeping in across Northern Ireland. So a keen breeze up here, further south, a lighter breeze as temperatures rise around 12-13 degrees Celsius. And that pretty much sets the scene for the weekend. Chilly mornings, but some milder air through the day. So, through Friday evening, we watch as these showers tend to just come and go across the western part of Scotland. Elsewhere, it's a dry evening, a cold night, even with a touch of frost and some mist and fog patches to start the day on Saturday. But this rain is approaching from the west. The winds are picking up some strength through Saturday morning, and eventually most places will see that rain through Saturday and into Sunday, where it could stall across the southeast. Elsewhere, showers will follow. So all in all, through the next few days, yes, after a bit of a chilly start on Saturday morning, the rain will arrive across the west. Watch out for it being heavy with gales towards the northwest. And here's your outlook into the first part of next week. Things slowly settle down from the south and it will turn cooler as well.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the